The idiot Lord marries 5 beautiful goddesses. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101, Reunion with her, 2. Christina was startled by the armored man's words and felt like she was dreaming and heard something wrong. Since she was guarding the fortress, she was unaware of what was happening in other parts of the kingdom. Furthermore, she couldn't believe that this tall man whose body exuded a powerful pressure was the husband she was forced to marry. From the beginning, Christina had no opinion of Alex, always thinking that he was a poor child who had been abandoned by the world. She had never hated Alex, but rather felt sympathy for him. Being an idiot, he had an indifferent attitude towards the world even though everyone was making fun of him. Even if we consider the possibility that he wasn't born an idiot, who can guarantee that he could survive in the cruel throne game where each of the siblings were trying to kill each other for the throne? Being an idiot can in some ways be considered as a blessing that had extended his life. And now, the person who used to be an idiot and whose body was like a ball was standing in front of him, making it seem as if her entire existence had been modified, so how could it be easy for her to believe it? Moreover, if such a change had occurred in reality, Catherine would have already been informed about it. After all, she kept a close eye on matters with Nevin. But she didn't know that there was a mole under Catherine's shadow who not only prevented information from reaching her but also modified the reports at his own will. As Catherine was busy with preparations for war, she didn't even have time to check on the things that had led to the current circumstances from not knowing the recent development that had taken place in Nevin. Christina, who was deep in thought, snapped out of her normal state upon hearing Alex's words and raised her sword to fight the master ranker, but was stopped by Alex. "Leave those bastards to that idiot of yours," Christina wanted to object but stopped upon hearing Alex's words. "I know better than anyone that you can defeat them, but we're fighting a war, not a battle of pride. I've already destroyed the flare and eliminated Amidon's ground forces, while those left fighting here are just a suicide squad that would die trying to take us down. You need to take care of them and take control of the fortress. The troops have been quite disorganized lately, so try to put everything in order. Then, do that while I'll have some fun with these idiots," Alex said and raised the huge sword over his shoulder and gestured for the master rank to reach out. The master wasn't able to properly identify the man and thought he might be a foolish lover of Christine who wanted to show off in this situation to pull at Christina's heartstrings. "You're trying to show off in front of us. You're courting death." The master rank with one hand missing roared angrily. He didn't waste any time as the newly arrived armored man and Christina exchanged words with each other. He was ready to unleash a fatal blow that could kill a peak rank master with a single strike. The sword in his hand, which was covered in a thick layer of energy, suddenly shot out like a bullet. His attack was more aggressive and faster than when he was fighting Christina. He was thinner and smaller than Alex, and his weapon was lighter and more inconspicuous than Alex's greatsword. He planned to use his fast movement and attack speed to tire Alex out and use a fatal blow to kill him. Alex smiled as he looked at the incoming attack. Alex's physical strength was now on par with the initial epic rank, meaning he could overpower any master rank with his strength alone. And the enemy attacking him was mediocre at best. Alex even overestimated the enemy by calling him mediocre. Alex lifted the huge sword from his shoulder and raised it into the air and spun his body in a full circle to build momentum. Turning his body 360 degrees, he abruptly stopped and took advantage of his body's momentum and slammed the huge sword into the incoming blade. Clang! A loud metallic clashing sound was heard and the enemy's body flew into the air. The enemy felt a sudden invasion of the opposing force that struck him hard. Just one strike from Alex had damaged the enemy's internal organs and he was blown away by Alex's sword strike while vomiting blood. His rapier was hit hard by the greatsword with superior force and shattered. Some of those sharp-edged pieces flew out of the rapier and sank into his body due to the power of the clash, causing deep cuts all over his body. The enemy was completely terrified as even before the contact of his rapier with the man's swords, he immediately knew that this man was much scarier than he thought and that he had no chance of winning the fight against him. "Go away!" he shouted to signal the other master rank who had a stunned expression as he tried to get back on his feet with his shaky legs. He warned the other masters to immediately retreat as he already knew that they would die pointlessly if they stayed around. Running back, He tried to jump down from the castle walls and threw a hook downwards, trying to pull his body away from the battle. However, he heard Alex's words from behind that sounded like the death knell of the Grim Reaper. "Since you've come here, there's no need for you to leave. Just rest in peace here." Alex didn't want to give this man who was already on the verge of death a chance to escape, and looking around, he kicked a broken sword on the ground. Shit. The sword traced the enemy's path as fast as lightning, and like a missile whose target had already been locked on in advance, it flew tearing through the air and pierced through the back of the man in midair and killed him instantly. The sword stuck his dead body into the ground under the defense wall, leaving the other master rank bewildered. He wanted to flee as soon as possible, but seeing the other master rank easily die, he was shocked to the core, because he knew that if he turned around, this man would sneak up from behind, and if he tried to fight head-on, he would die as well. Seeing no way out, he roared in anger. "Fuck you," he roared ferociously and began to use a secret technique to burn his life essence. "Even if I die, I'll take a son of a bitch like you with me." Nova burst. A stream of red-hot energy appeared on his body, which was as hot as erupting lava, radiating deadly heat all around, and his figure shot towards Alex. Alex frowned as he watched the enemy use such a maneuver, and his massive sword turned into a cloud of black shadow in his hand and moved as fast as lightning and slashed at the man's Nova blast strike with a massive amount of force that was enough to cut through anything in front of him. Chapter 102. Did you like the fireworks? BOOO. The fire burning on the armor was extinguished after a moment, leaving behind gas fumes that rose from the armor and were cooled by gentle breezes of wind. Alex felt dizzy, and his body began to tremble for a moment due to the impact that caught him by surprise. Everyone was shocked to see the invincible armored man being pushed back. No one knew what kind of face was under the helmet. They didn't even know if it was male or female, even though the voice was like that of a man. But no matter what, this armored person had gained the trust and respect of the soldiers on right side. Although they were still on guard from within, they couldn't express the gratitude they felt towards the stranger. But Christina, who knew the person inside the armor, started to run towards him but stopped when he stood up. "Damn it," Alex cursed under his helmet as he felt a strong burning sensation beneath the armor. Due to the fire, he suffered burns on his face and chest. That bastard had used a secret technique to burn his remaining life force to gain a huge boost and advance to the epic rank. Burning life essence can be done naturally if you are above the transcendent realm, as those above it have transcended the limit of humans and had a long lifespan, but to blow that realm up, you need forbidden techniques. Alex didn't know how Amidon managed to get his hands on such a forbidden technique, but it was surely bad news. He still concluded that only this man knew this technique, as other master ranks didn't use such means. The opponent's terrifying strength hit him hard during the collision, causing his right hand to go numb, but more than that, he was worried about the exploding flames. This man had become a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment. Ho ha ho 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 ha ho ha! A sinister, screeching metallic laugh rang out, and from within the flames, the enemy appeared. Half of his body was on fire, his hair was on fire, and his chest had turned as dark as charcoal. Looking at him, everyone was sure that this man was on his last legs. "Even if I die, I will take you with me. Without you, there will be no one who can interfere and stop Amidon from destroying this place," he roared with all his might as a fiery breath erupted from him. In your dreams, Alex shouted and pulled his helmet out to take in some fresh air, shocking everyone. For a moment everyone's heartbeats quickened as they saw huge and terrifying burns on his face, which might have looked quite gruesome, but on his face they weren't as horrifying as they should be. The lips along with the cheeks had been burned away, leaving white teeth exposed. But soon, his face began to glow and the burns began to disappear, as if they had never been present. Everyone who witnessed it was stunned for a moment. Even Christina wasn't in any better condition. After all, how could he not be shocked when the difference between the Alex he knows and the Alex who was fighting here was identical to heaven and hell? As soon as his face was healed, the heavenly appearance coupled with his indomitable temperament was enough to put most men to shame and wreak havoc on the hearts of maidens. He has long, thick blonde hair, paired with his white, smooth skin with a perfectly carved face. His crimson eyes had a unique glow. He had sword-like eyebrows, a thin nose, and a sharp V-shaped jaw that made his face stand out even more. The enemy who had cut him roared angrily, and channeling all his strength into his leg, he lunged towards Alex. The soldiers and Christina were worried about Alex as they saw him slowly recovering and thought to buy some time for Alex to heal. But they couldn't get even an inch closer to the explosive energy and pressure. Christina gritted her teeth as she endured the pain of the explosive force and tightened her grip on her sword, She slashed with all her might, but the explosive fiery energy overpowered her attacks and completely engulfed her. The enemy threw his left wrist towards Christina, sending out huge flames of fire that exploded before him. Gathering his strength, he swung his sword diagonally, which cut through the cloud of flames coming towards her, but from the narrow space, she saw the man change direction and charge towards her. "Bitch! Since you want to die first, I'll take you down first," he roared and leapt at Christina. He empowered his weapon with a fiery mass of energy that radiated heat as hot as lava, and with red flames on his sword, he stabbed his rapier at Christina, deciding to teach this bitch a lesson. The soldiers and defenders were terrified as they witnessed the scene. Although many of them wanted to help, they couldn't, and their interference would become a burden to Christina, so they just had to believe in her. Christina took a step back as she charged her sword to attack. However, before the enemy could advance, the shadow of a figure appeared before her, and the figure of the burning man disappeared from her sight. Alex used flight magic and held the man as she carried him into the sky. She gritted her teeth to hold back the burning finger under her gauntlets. Her skin burned repeatedly even under the effect of the healing spell, causing her to have an unbearable urge to scratch her fingers as a layer of skin peeled off and grew back. Alex, holding the man's shoulders that were burning with flames and gathering strength, threw him into the sky. The man was launched straight into the sky as if he were a rocket booster. But even in that condition, he brought his hands together, forming a hollow cup-shaped sign as the burning mass of energy began to gather. The flames condensed in his hand to the limit and shot towards Alex like a scorching beam of fire that looked like a punishment from heaven. Like a flamethrower, the massive pillar of fire reached Alex and wanted to burn him to ashes without letting go of everything. Alex's pupil contracted as he felt the intense heat descend upon him, and he took a deep breath as he clenched his fist tightly. His fist was enveloped in a crimson hue and began to emit a bright flash. Raising his fist as his body floated in the air, he twisted his body slightly to generate as much force as possible and shouted as he punched the incoming beam of fire. "Powerful punch. Shit. Bam." There was a cracking sound of something shattering that made a high-pitched, shrill noise, and the beam of fire that suddenly descended towards Alex split into two halves, and as it split into two halves, the beam of light fell on the surface, causing a huge explosion as it emitted a sea of flames that rushed everywhere. A concentrated mass of air seemed to emerge from Alex's body that manifested into a huge crystallized fist that split the beam of light shot towards the master rank. The master rank felt a life-threatening danger and swiped his hands and feet as he tried to evade it, but Alex's powerful punch reached him in a second and struck his body, obscuring his vision for eternity. The only thing the man saw before he died was a huge enlarged manifestation of a fist that crushed him, causing his entire body to burst into a bloody mist. The flaming energy contained within the body suddenly expanded and detonated in the sky, forming a mini burning sun. Boo! He could feel the horrible power of the explosion even from afar, but more than that, he lost all the master ranks that had been granted to him. Those useless scum. I can only resort to them if the situation worsens. Meanwhile, Alex's body floated above the fortress and watched the explosion with a solemn expression. He flew back and landed beside Christina and spoke with a faint smile. "Tell me, did you like the fireworks?" Chapter 103, Reality is not what it seems. While chaos reigned in Ride and Amidon, far away from the chaos was a peaceful place. Lockhart Merchants Confederation, Lock City. Allseer Street. This name may not be well known to the common populace, whose day begins with the worry of feeding their mouths, but there was no one among the high society in the entire world of Everton, regardless of their country of origin or species of origin, who did not know this name. The heart of the city of prosperous Lock stretched for about 50 kilometers. It was not an especially long strip of land, but it is rumored that 60% of Kinley and 20% of the entire world's fortune were concentrated around this plot of land. Extravagance is deeply rooted in the genes of those who live in this place. Lockhart had created the most extravagant city in the entire world, but this extravagance in turn was commercialized and naturally attracted high-level individuals to this place, which in turn caused shops and businesses to thrive here. The royalty and power in the major continents, the princes and princesses of small kingdoms, along with every person walking down the street, exalted a certain position, and it was common for them to spend a large sum of money to prove their worth. In the noble sector of Lock City, the leaders of the major merchant associations had gathered with their heads slightly lowered in respect, showing none of the arrogance they usually have due to their power and money. Most of the places in Lock City were Lockhart's private places, So every shop had to settle Lockhart's annual check in order to continue operating for the following year. Today was the day where the annual check would be held, which would be presided over by one of the core members of Lockhart's family. Sitting on the chair in front of all of them was a young woman. She had long, reddish hair with orange highlights at the tips of the strands that gently fell down her shoulders, and her reddish eyes were both calm and cold. She watched them like a hawk watching its prey. She carried a dignified and noble aura. That was the impression most people had. Yvonne Lockhart, without any flashy accessories or gorgeous dresses, her very existence felt majestic and noble, as if all the luxuries in the world should belong to her. The Lockharts were said to have inherited their bloodline from the goddess of fortune. In legends, there was a race devoted to the goddess who ruled the wealth of the world, and mortals offered them everything without hesitation. At this gathering, it seemed as if the legend had manifested itself in the real world. The woman carried within her the grace of the goddess and calmly read a set of financial reports in her hands. Her emerald eyes did not reflect any fluctuation in her emotions. It was impossible to tell what she was thinking. She raised her head and her eyes locked onto a particular man, and a cold but pleasant-toned voice was heard. "I have read your financial report. Mr. Hales, it seems your income has increased a lot this year, then, congratulations." "Thank you, Mom. Yes, it was all thanks to your support and Lockhart's blessing," a voice burst out on Hale's face as she began to express her gratitude towards Lockhart, which seemed rather pleasing to the eye as she fawned over Yvonne. "This is your first time entering here, isn't it?" "Yes, Lady Yvonne. Our merchant group joined Lockhart's association last year." "This is the first time that," Hale bowed and answered Yvonne's question, but before she could finish her words, a sharp, chilling voice had already interrupted her. "Is that so? Then you won't have to appear again next year, eh?" "Excuse me, what did you just say? Perhaps I heard something wrong." Hale raised his head and looked at Yvonne sitting in a chair in front of him in bewilderment, and while maintaining the same impassive expression he calmly replied, "Your license to operate in our territory has been revoked. You have 1 month to pack your things and leave the place, otherwise we would be enforcing our law and blocking your group of merchants." "Wait a moment. Lady Yvonne, you have seen our financial reports. Why are you asking us to move out and revoke our license? I cannot allow it." "This is unreasonable," Hales exclaimed in astonishment and demanded to be told the reason fiercely. "Your numbers are good and your business is thriving. However, allow me to ask you a question. The money listed in the reports comes from your business as written in the report, or does it come from some other source?" Yvonne spoke in a sharp tone as she stared at Hales, causing the hairs on his skin to stand up. Yvonne's words sent an electric shock through Hales, and his body shuddered as he saw the woman's terrifying senses that terrified not only him but others at the conference as well. Through many years of experience in dealing with all kinds of people while doing business, he tried to put on a poker face and calm himself down, but no matter how much he tried to explain the situation, he was helpless against Yvonne's fierce response and cold eyes. "You don't need to explain yourself. You're a useless guy now. The aura of fortune has already left you. Let me guess. It must be gambling and drug dealing, right?" Yvonne spoke as she tapped her fingers on the table. Upon receiving the signal, the assistant standing beside her took out a document and passed it to Hales, whose expression darkened and sweat began to run down his forehead in fear. Hale's face darkened as he took the document with worried hands and examined it. Inside were all the details of his shady business. Seeing this, many clicked their tongues. Some did so out of annoyance, while others did so to express their pity towards that foolish man. There was a rumor since ancient times that Lockhart could see the aura of fortune on a person and turn everything cold. Although it may not be true in the literal sense, rumors do not arise out of nowhere. While they couldn't turn everything into gold, they had something almost as good as that, which was the ability to sense fortune. From risky investments to business partnerships that didn't pay off, Lockhart only needed to smell the scent of money to make the investment. Furthermore, they had a terrifying perception of finding out whether a person was lucky enough or not. Many didn't believe it, but after witnessing Lockhart's segregation of people based on this and later on, it would be proven to be true. According to people who make money through shady means lose the blessing of the goddess of fortune. Even though they may earn large sums now, in the long run they are destined to suffer and be destroyed. Lady Yvonne, please give this pleasure another chance. I will put an end to all such things. Please give me another chance, Hale shouted and jumped towards where she was sitting, but before he could reach her, a strong hand grabbed him. "Mark, throw him out," a clear voice echoed. "Yes, my lady," Mark bowed his head and in an instant, his figure disappeared. Mark was a transcendent rank expert and like him, 5 guards would always be with Yvonne to protect him. The other merchants watched the scene indifferently as they chatted amongst themselves. HMPH. A newcomer trying to trick Lady Yvonne. What a fool, I still can't believe there are people out there who would think of tricking Lady Yvonne, it's just a futile attempt on their part. Lady Yvonne is a prodigy that only appears once every century, even in the Lockhart family. Did everyone forget that when she was born the statue of the goddess of wealth shone across the world, indicating that she had the goddess blessing? Rather than wasting time flattering me, everyone should use it wisely. Yvonne sighed deeply as she spoke. This was not something new and everywhere there would be some weirdos who would try their luck at performing these kinds of foolish actions. It's fate, they have chosen themselves. Miss, please don't bother thinking about it. Should I take a break? The lady beside her stepped forward and spoke in a humble tone. Yvonne was quite tired after having checked on a few merchants, so she agreed to her assistant's suggestion. Yvonne nodded, following which everyone took their leave and all the assistants immediately sprang into action and quickly removed the work-related furniture, and the ceiling above slowly turned into a transparent skylight. The wall at their back opened up, revealing a beautiful garden filled with blooming flowers. In just a few moments, the entire room changed from a solemn conference room to a cheerful resting area filled with greenery. Yvonne's reddish-orange hair seemed to shine under the natural sunlight. Attendees enjoyed a fine tea served by a tea master, followed by exquisite desserts freshly prepared by world-class pastry chefs. An attendant walked up to Yvonne and bowed her head for confirmation, moving behind her and starting to massage her shoulders. "Hella, you're still the best," Yvonne said with a sweet and gentle smile as she extended her hand to take the tea. However, the sudden arrival of a messenger interrupted their relaxed session. "Miss, we have an urgent message." Yvonne raised her eyebrows and asked, "About what topic?" "It's about Nevin and Wright." Yvonne frowned and stood up with an uneasy expression. "Bring it," Yvonne ordered. She took the message from the messenger and opened it as her eyes scanned the document. Her expression changed from shock to amazement when she read about Nevin's recent events, but the last section of the letter surprised her. As she passed the letter to her assistant, she shouted, "Call Andrew." Hearing her call, a man appeared as quickly as possible. "Andrew, what is this? How did Emmett get the funds to wage war even after we imposed economic sanctions on him, or did someone approve their loan right under our noses?" "Miss, I have personally supervised the matter. We rejected their loan demand and forbade anyone from giving them the funds. Therefore, I do not know how they got the funds." Andrew spoke and scratched his head. "Miss, I don't think even our competitors would risk offending us by disobeying our order." Yvonne closed her eyes and sank into deep thought. The situation was not as easy as it seems. Although it may not seem like it, at that moment Nevin was the center of the entire world. And the person who lay at the center of the whole storm was known besides Alex. Although the Emperor of Kinley pulled the strings and forced the 5 of them to marry Alex due to the consequences, the matter surely wasn't like that, it seems. Just like in their case, it all started with the Emperor of Kinley forcing them to give a portion of their earnings to contribute to the welfare of the kingdom under the pretext that they should pay more as they earned more, which my father flatly refused. And he decided to move the entire lot to another continent if the situation worsened. But one day, her father's stance suddenly changed and he accepted defeat, which surprised not only her but all the family members. But it was not surprising that she decided to accept the Emperor's condition for her marriage with Alex. Her siblings even decided to rebel because of their father's decision. But one day her father came to her and told her to accept the proposal and that they had to do it no matter what. The worried and sad expression on his father's face made his heart ache in pain. He remembered how he cried all night alongside his father, who told him that the matter was not what it seemed and that one day he would realize that this marriage would be the best thing that would happen to him in life. Hearing this, he started to investigate the 5th Prince Alex. Although people say that he was an idiot and a fat disgusting pig and the Emperor was displeased with him, but the news he received from the sources said that the Emperor had never expressed his displeasure towards Alex and that it was just a rumor that people assumed, as the people assumed that the Emperor wanted to humiliate women by forcing them to marry Alex. The Emperor had never expressed anything directly, which made the people assume his fantasies, creating his rumors. More so, many believe that Alex was the Emperor's secret weapon, which he was honing under the pretext of treating him like a fool. There was even a rumor that when the sky fell, the 5th sun, bearer of the power of God, would do its part, leading many people to assume that it had to be something with Kinley. Because thousands of years ago, Kinley was known as the land of the sun that drove away the darkness that prevailed in that era. Furthermore, only the royal family of Kinley carries the blood of the gods. And many assumed that the fifth son could be Alex, but it was proven that he does not carry the power of the bloodline of God, as the ceremony to awaken the blood of God was carried out before everyone on top of him being born as an idiot. Furthermore, she knew better than anyone what Alex's character is like, so it's a big no-no even before thinking of such baseless rumors. After all, rumors and predictions usually infiltrate society in one way or another. Furthermore, no one had ever seen the face of Alex's mother, who usually remains hidden and was said to be supporting Kinley from the shadows. Under the countless mysteries and rumors, only God knows what is true and what is not, but Alex returning to normal would surely attract a lot of attention. And besides, the war had to happen now. Surely it's not Amiden's fault. There are those who pull the strings behind the scenes. Should I lend him a hand? Although I don't care about him, my sister might be involved in this war. I have to visit her and ask for her opinion. Only she can guide me on what to do now, Yvonne murmured as her eyes sparkled with brightness at the thought of her. Get the carriage ready. We're going to visit the saint. Chapter 104, This Girl Has No Chills. A magnificent carriage pulled by many beautiful white horses was advancing rapidly. Its current destination was Chelsea City, which was quite close to the Holy City. People stepped aside to make way for the carriage passing by in case they offended the person sitting inside it unconsciously. Inside was a red-haired girl who was gazing at the scenery of the city passing by her as her mind drifted to the events that happened just over a year ago that changed her life completely along with that of 4 other people. Arriving at the branch of her merchant association, she changed her appearance. She wore a black streak along with a skin mask that changed her appearance and walked through the crowded streets. Walking beside her were 4 people who wore black ethnic dresses with cloaks covering their faces that made them look like a poor group who may have come here to offer their holy prayers. But behind the cloaks were Yvonne's fierce bodyguards, and every single one of them was a transcendent rank. Yvonne was at the peak of the disciple rank recently. She might have reached the master rank if it weren't for that incident where she had to sacrifice part of her life. Heading to the outer district, which was normally filled with social outcasts and poor people, whose lives were in stark contrast to those of the people living in Lock City. She arrived at a small orphanage that used to be an old church built by someone who wanted to spread religion and the knowledge of God to the common people, but was stopped due to many factions opposing it since it was in a marginal area. But since the church had already been created, it couldn't be destroyed because it might be considered a heresy, so they left it open, but no one agreed to become a priest here until she moved here. Standing in front of the church, she pushed open the door, causing piercing rays of sunlight to illuminate the entire dimly lit hallway. I might be in the prayer chamber, Yvonne muttered to herself and walked into the hallway towards the inner chamber. Arriving at the center, she saw the statue of goddess Rebecca beneath which a lady dressed in white robes was sitting on her knees while clasping her hands together. Athena, the lady who used to be known as Saint and who many thought would have a bright future, had now become the priestess of this small space. She had perfect looks, perfect ability, and a temperament that could even outshine the angels of heaven itself. Out of a strange group of 5, both Rhea and her were too beautiful, which can even trigger jealousy in some goddesses. While Rhea had a rather seductive and sensual figure, Athena had a gentle and innocent outlook that made her look saintly even with her busty figure. If one had to find a flaw in this woman whose existence seemed blessed by heaven itself, it would be her overflowing kindness and gentleness, which make her extremely difficult to deal with, even for Yvonne. While Yvonne is quick-witted and confident in herself to deal with situations, Athena lets nature take its course. Until the situation required her intervention, she didn't even budge from her decision, but once she decided to do something, nothing in the world could stop her. Though that didn't mean she was easy to deal with. It seemed like she had a little bit of each of the 4's main characteristics. Catherine's wisdom, Christina's bravery, and a beauty comparable to Rhea's, and she also had a very deep aura of fortune. And to her surprise, the aura of fortune had thickened even further compared to last time. And marrying that idiot Alex was one of the things she willingly agreed to for some unknown damn reason. Otherwise, no matter how strong Kinley was, it was impossible to win against church without suffering repercussions. Yvonne, aren't you going to offer your prayer to the goddess? Since you are here, you should pray from time to time, otherwise the goddess might consider you rude. A pleasant voice sounded in her ears, like a heavenly melody. For a moment she was startled at how she knew that, but her surprise didn't last long because she knew that Athena had other means. Yvonne didn't argue and nodded. She took off her shoes and followed Athena's idea and sat like her and prayed for a while. The guards also prayed for a while, and after receiving their orders they left the room and stood outside while guarding it. Athena, I have some news about him. Athena, who was praying with her eyes closed, suddenly opened them and blinked a few times. She had crimson eyes that glowed for a moment, but the glow quickly faded, leaving a black pupil. Her expression changed slightly, and standing up, she took a small cloth and wrapped it around her eyes and asked Yvonne to follow her. Athena led her into the inner room. Yvonne followed her and asked curiously, "Hey, how can you walk like this even though you've gone blind? The last time I was here, I remembered you were led by those cute little kids." Foo, foo, foo. Athena laughed and explained, "I may have lost my sight, but I still have most of my powers. I can sense the flow of mana. Each object had a particular mana signature that helped me identify it, just like how your orange glow covering your body let me know you had come here." Yvonne nodded. She remembered that Athena had told her that the effects of blindness are not permanent and that her sight might recover, but only God knows how long it will take. Brewing some tea in a teapot and pouring it for Yvonne, he sat down beside her and spoke in a soft tone, "So, how is Alex?" "I don't know what to say." It hadn't been long since that guy woke up and he was already looking for trouble. Athena's brows furrowed for a moment and she asked curiously, "Last time, I remember you saying that you received a report on his recovery and training. Then how can he cause such a ruckus in such a short time?" Apparently, after a few days, he confronted the nobles and drove them away and suppressed them. Recently there was some trouble in the western part of Nevin and he marched with 100 soldiers and cleaned them up. Whoa. Alex has become quite impressive in the time I haven't seen him, Athena exclaimed with a surprised expression as she covered her mouth with her hand. Yvonne's lips moved for a moment as she thought about it inwardly. Although it was a good thing, I don't know what's so wonderful about it. Besides, since he recovered, wasn't it his duty to take care of the kingdom as the king unless he wanted to drink alcohol to sleep and remain an idiot for the rest of his life? Silence. Yvonne sighed as she watched Athena cheering Alex on like a fan after hearing his actions. He's also pushing Nevin forward on the economic front and introducing reform after reform. My head hurts reading the reports that make it seem like he's doing something new every day. I don't know how it's possible to change so much like that. Who knows, maybe it's the goddess blessing, Athena said smiling. Yvonne rolled her eyes trying to ignore her annoying words, otherwise she was sure she might yell at her, and since everything is the goddess' wish, shouldn't your downfall also be an arrangement of the goddess, whom you've dedicated your life to? I don't know what it is you like about him. Is there anything about him that you might like? Yvonne said in annoyance. Who said there isn't any? I love that cute and charming cheek of his. I've known him since I was 10, and I used to visit him when I went to the castle to cast blessings on him and play with him afterwards. Those times were so sweet. I wish I could cage him and have him with me. Yvonne almost spat out her tea at his words, as she was startled by the sudden intervention. But I heard that he had slimmed down and grown and had become quite muscular. Now the cheeks that you loved are gone, so what now? Yvonne asked with a big smile on her face. What? He had already slimmed down? So what if his cheeks are gone? I'm going to feel his muscular body and all his abs. He would surely look heavenly with his well-toned body and those red eyes combined with the golden hair. He must look like a banished immortal. Athena spoke with an excited tone as if she was praising her idol. Wipe the drool off your face and stop acting like a pervert. Why the fuck did you lose your cool when talking about that pig? Stop being vulgar, Yvonne shouted. You were a saint before, so don't ruin your image. What do you mean vulgar? Am I praising and fantasizing about my own husband? If you're so jealous of my husband's divine beauty, why don't you go find your husband and try to brag about him? Athena said with a satisfied smile. Did you forget that he's also my husband? But that doesn't mean I can talk about such things openly. Yvonne spoke as she slammed her hand on the table, but her tongue got tied thinking about what she had said. See, stop acting like an ignorant fool. Now that Alex is back to normal, we can start a normal life instead of trying to deny our destiny, Athena said with a smile. Fate? Huh? What do you mean by that, Athena? Tell me the truth. Do you know anything about it? Besides, didn't the church have seers who could glimpse the future? Fate? What fate? And when will we have seers? What do you mean by that? Athena tried to feign ignorance, but Yvonne continued on as she thought she understood something, but Athena didn't even take her seriously. All right. Let's stop. This was where the serious conversation started. Yvonne spoke with a sigh as she didn't get anything useful from Athena. Amidin has declared war on Right, and Amidin had invested heavily in this war. Although I stopped my merchant association from granting the loan, our rivals tried their luck in this war by granting huge loans to Amidin. I'm pretty sure Catherine and Christina would have trouble defending themselves against him, especially after Kinley attacked him and took his defensive artifact that Right relied on to win every war so far. Then what should we do? Yvonne asked with a serious expression. What do you want to do? Athena asked with a curious look. Shouldn't we? I mean, lend a hand. I think sending 2 or 3 transcendent ranked experts might be of great help to them. Oh, Yvonne, calm down. Are you thinking of interfering in the war? Did you forget your neutral policy? You have no political power, so you can't interfere in the war between the kingdoms, Athena explained. That might be before, but now that my so-called husband is in trouble along with our sisters, shouldn't we extend a helping hand to him? Athena put down her cup and raised her head towards Yvonne, who felt a sharp gaze that seemed to penetrate deep into her soul. If you want to help as a wife, then I don't think this is the right time. The war has just begun, and who said that Amidin would win the war? What if they were brutally defeated? Then, your interference, in that case, would be unnecessary, and furthermore, it would bring you more trouble. Athena's lips curved upwards as she spoke. Also, this battle is not about Right or Amidin. This is the beginning of the battle between Alex and those forces that had been testing the waters. And don't tell me, even with your vast resources, you can't guess that. Yvonne nodded her head upon hearing Athena's words. Therefore, if you want to help, just watch from the sidelines and intervene if your lives are at stake. Still, I don't think they would go to the extent of killing them, and at best, they would imprison them. Athena slumped as she rested her chin on her palm and said, Yvonne, let me tell you one thing about Alex. Alex is truly an asshole. He doesn't care or know anything about this world, but there's one thing in particular that makes him special. Even when he was an idiot, he knew what he treasured the most and would pounce on it if anyone tried to take it away from him, even though he wasn't able to understand anything. He would burst into rage when someone tried to snatch Raya away from him, and now that he had become a normal person. Besides, we have already fulfilled our duty as their wives, and now it's your job to fulfill your duty as a husband, which you must fulfill no matter what. You seem to be curious about the things that are happening. Let me give you an omen as a gift of our meeting. Countless threads of faith intertwined and tangled in the sea of time to nourish the destiny that carries a huge burden for the world and prepare the children of destiny for the coming crisis. Destruction will follow the ground they tread on. When they start wreaking havoc, even the pleas from heaven fall on deaf ears, Athena said with a smile. What kind of shit is this? Who the fuck are you talking about? Yvonne asked with a curious expression. Ha. Nothing, it was just random conversations and a pickup line I picked up from the kids. Fuck. I forgot about the kids. Now get out of here quickly. Unlike you, I have to take care of the neighborhood kids. Those cute little kids could come over to pray. Athena stood up and dragged Yvonne away, who asked her to explain those words, but her plea fell on deaf ears and she was eventually chased out. Wait? Angela, answer my question before you kick me out, Yvonne's voice echoed, but Athena turned a blind eye to her screams and slammed the door in her face. Clank. Closing the doors, she leaned against the wall as she wiped the sweat from her forehead. This girl doesn't get chills. Chapter 105, Pledging His Loyalty. In Jorge's fortress. The entire place was in chaos. The fortress walls had been torn down, and due to the fight with the ranks of the masters, the walls had suffered greatly and many cracks had appeared on them. The mages, along with the soldiers who knew a bit about masonry, tried to fill in the cracks while the wounded and injured were carried away on stretchers. Everyone seemed to be running around carrying things because they knew that the recovery period might not last long and Amidin might resort to foul play and attack at night, so they were trying to finish the preparation as quickly as possible. While outside was filled with chaos and turmoil, inside the commander's office 2 figures were sitting opposite each other as they silently observed each other. The atmosphere was quite tense and cold. Tension could be seen rising in the air and sparks could be seen flying everywhere as Alex and Christina's gazes met. Both of them looked at each other, trying to discern the other. Alex was thinking about how to start the conversation with Christina, who seemed to be sitting like a statue. No matter how much Alex observed, he couldn't see even a minuscule change in Christina's expression that would make him think whether she had emotions or not. Alex thought that his appearance might have stunned, shocked, and surprised her to such an extent that it might have even made her feel like she was dreaming, but no. Except for the change in expression when he appeared and hailed her, Alex didn't find any, or he might have missed some while he was busy dealing with the enemies. Well, Christina, how are you? Are you doing alright? Christian tilted his head and pondered for a moment and replied, You already know my situation, so why are you asking me? Alex nearly choked upon hearing his words and thought that he might not like that roundabout way of speaking. Contrary to Alex's opinion of Christina, whom she considered to be emotionless, the goddess of war was going mad inside. Unlike others, when she was in panic or shock, the bare expression she had would also freeze, making her look like a cold, emotionless doll. Furthermore, she didn't even know what was going on. This man who was in a coma and on a deathbed not only recovered and appeared here, but also seemed to have grown stronger at a rate incomparable to any genius she had ever seen. Seeing the genuine interest in her reflected in his eyes, she didn't know how to react or reciprocate his feelings. And she was so shocked that she didn't know how to express herself. Since she was little it was all about training and fighting, and she doesn't have many connections with the opposite sex. She couldn't even remember the last time she smiled or felt the happiness of being with her loved ones. Her family had a noble status and her father had a very high status in the military, but due to an unfortunate incident, he died and the other army officers who were jealous of him, slandered him after his death and tried to bring down his house. Her mother tried her best to avoid the crisis, but no matter how hard she tried, the noble status of her house fell and they became one of the fallen nobles who were looked down upon by noble society. The only chance her mother had to redeem her reputation and regain her status was to marry into another noble house, but she knew that if she married a second time, Christina would surely suffer, so she rejected all the proposals and took it upon herself to revive the house. Christina remembered how her mother, who was as beautiful as a blooming flower, slowly began to wither and tear apart from all sides. She still remembered how her mother wore the mask of happiness that hid her inner pain and a broken heart. So Christina made a decision. Instead of going to the academy, she decided to join the army at the age of 11. She was already hailed as a genius since the age of 10 due to her superior sword skills and was invited by many scholars, but she turned them down and joined the army so that she could rise in position faster and be able to revive her house quickly by taking some of the burdens off of herself. Within just 4 years of joining she rose from the rank of private to lieutenant, and by the age of 20 she had already become a general, which was a high-ranking position in Kinley's army, and she attained it at the age of 20, which added more prestige to her. But when she was already a general, she heard something that left her completely shocked. Her father's death was not an accident, nor did he die on the battlefield as they were told, but he was stabbed in the back by one of her friends, who was a major general of the same rank as her father. She swore to avenge her father by killing the man who was responsible for all her misfortunes. But later, she found out that the man was under the second prince's wing, and waging war against the man meant going against the second prince, but she did not bat an eyelid at this matter. But the man did not leave her alone, and tried to frame her for colliding with other empires. The only way for her to redeem herself was to come under the second prince's wing, or expose the man's dirty secrets. After gathering all the evidence, she, along with her legion, specifically trained by her, went against the man's army. Her legion, consisting of 32,000 soldiers, went to war and massacred nearly 80,000 soldiers of the major general, which also caused a great loss to the second prince's faction, who decided to wipe her out for a fear that she might pose a threat to him in his rise to the throne by weakening his position. The rift between them leads to an avalanche of chaos. Finally, unable to bring her down, the emperor finally intervened by branding her a rebel. She tried to prove her father's innocence and even showed all the evidence along with the evidence that the man under the second prince's command was the one who started the war first. But all her pleas fell on deaf ears. No matter what justification she showed, raising a sword against a prince of the empire was a crime that could not be ruled out. Her mother broke down upon learning of her daughter's condition and passed away in grief. The emperor, due to all her achievements, gave her two options. First, to die for rebelling. Second, if she regrets her mistake, she will be stripped of her title, crippled, and will have to restart her journey as a warrior all over again. Her legion, specially trained by her, would be handed over to other generals. Furthermore, she had to marry the idiot prince and became the general of the small kingdom of Nevin. Learning of her mother's death, who was unable to take things, broke the last bit of rationality Christina had left. Her mother was the only one whose existence saved her from despair, but her mother's death was too much for her to bear. Why? Just why? She had to go through all this. While most girls enjoy putting on makeup and spending their money on shopping, she, with a sword in her hand, had to lay waste to the enemy forces. In a moment of despair and with her life surrounded by darkness, she just wanted to die to let go of all her sorrows. But at the last moment, she received Catherine's message, who advised her to choose the second option. After all, living is better than dying. And she thinks about revenge against her enemies. As long as she lives, she can get her revenge. All she needed to do was start from scratch. No matter how many years it takes, she will surely have her revenge. Revenge was the only thing that kept her alive until now, and except for the empty feeling of a broken heart, immense hatred and anger were the only emotions she could feel now. Thinking about all the past events, she clenched her fists tightly to the point that her long nails dug into her skin, causing blood to run from her hands. "Are you thinking about the past?" Christina snapped out of her thoughts when she heard Alex's voice and frowned. She blinked with a surprised expression that looked rather cute in Alex's eyes. Alex laughed as she saw a subtle change in Christina's expression. A woman who doesn't show any expression and looks cold can only show emotion when she thinks about the horrible and painful past, Alex said when she heard about Christina's past from Ridaya, which was rather sad. Alex thought for a moment on how to proceed. He knew that flowery words of flattery wouldn't work on Christina and might even disgust her. He recalled a time when he once asked the goddess of lust to teach him tricks to melt a girl's heart, but as a result, he spanked her. According to her, only a playboy goes around playing with girls, while a real man wins a girl's heart with actions, and he needs to figure out for himself how to make his wives trust him first. Trust is the bridge that reduces the gap between parties in a relationship, and once it's broken, everything falls apart. What's more, his wives even sacrificed their lives to save him while suffering heart-wrenching pain. So at the very least, he had to show them his sincerity, and since Christina was too dumb to talk nonsense, Alex decided to get straight to the point. Alex stood up from his seat and walked towards Christina, leaning on one of his knees as he extended his hand. He said, "Christina, I won't pretend to understand what you've been through in the past or tell you to forget it. Your past would be the foundation of your future, and I, Alex, your so-called husband, promised you that I would help you achieve your goals and get your revenge. There will be nothing that can stop you from cutting off the heads of the enemies. Even if you have to fight against God, you will always find me by your side. Neither in the rear nor in the front. We will fight side by side for centuries to come. May heaven be witness and may hell punish me if I break the oath." Christina's eyes widened, and as her golden eyes met Alex's resolute gaze, which was filled with sincerity, she didn't know why she felt as if her heart was telling her to trust the man unconditionally. What Alex did know was how to swear an oath in the manner of a knight, where knights made the promise when they were accepted by a master and swore their undying loyalty. Seeing the unwavering integrity in Alex's eyes, Christina unconsciously extended her hand, which Alex held firmly, and with a soft smile murmured, "This knight of yours shall swear his loyalty, Lady Christina." Chapter 106, Visiting the Wounded. After taking Christina's hand and taking the oath in the traditional knight's way, where they chose their master and pledged to remain loyal for eternity, Alex looked at Christina and asked with a solemn expression, "Can I examine you a little?" "Huh? What do you mean?" Christina asked with a surprised expression upon hearing Alex's sudden question, and tried to pull her hands away from Alex, but Alex held them tightly. "Hey, what are you doing? I'm just going to check your wound and nothing more." Alex spoke to her and explained, which calmed Christina down. "Refrendo," Alex muttered the spell as she held Christina's hands and poured her mana, which slowly made its way through Christina. Christina's body shuddered and shook for a moment as she felt a sudden invasion of strange energy into her body, which unconsciously forced her to put her guard up. "Calm down. Don't resist," Alex shouted as she focused on her work. Christina's entire body glowed for a moment, and a greenish hue covered her body completely. The glow enveloped Christina for a few moments and then dissipated. "SHHH," Alex sighed deeply and withdrew her hand. "Your soul is slightly damaged. Although soul damages are serious, yours is rather minimal, and it is your persistence in training yourself that is delaying recovery. Furthermore, even a small amount of soul damage would cause one to remain bedridden for months." "So how can you fight in this state?" Alex asked with a solemn expression. "I'm used to this heart-wrenching pain." "It doesn't hurt that much," Christina said indifferently as she tightly squeezed the hand Alex was holding. After all, this was her first time touching someone of the opposite sex except for her father. Christina's words stunned Alex for a moment. He had never imagined that there was someone with such a high tolerance. Soul damage is no small matter because there are no spells that can heal damaged souls. One can only supplement and nourish a soul through various medicines and natural treasures, or temper it through constant training, but healing a damaged soul is not possible even for a god. Furthermore, Although Alex said it was nothing serious, the matter is troublesome as even 0.0001% damage to the soul brings about heart-wrenching pain. She's a tough girl, Alex muttered to himself. So, Christina from now on allows me to lead. I'll take care of things here, Alex, you don't have to. I can still. Alex interrupted Christina in the middle of her speech and said, listen, lady, I'm not underestimating you in any way, this war is just the tip of the iceberg. The real war is yet to come. You just need to recover by the time the real war begins. I have a spell that will speed up your recovery and nourish your soul, Alex said in a tone that did not seek any refusal. Christina still wanted to object, but she was unable to refute Alex's sharp and piercing gaze. In the meantime, we should find that bastard who is playing a double role. Alex's lips curved upwards with a smile. Alex discussed his plans with Christina before setting off with her towards the infirmary to check on the wounded. In the infirmary of George's fortress, Alex entered, followed by Christina, Mordek, and Frank. Alex's footsteps paused for a moment as he took in the facility from within. A cold, damp, and musty smell filled this seemingly abandoned place. The place was filled with dust and cobwebs could be seen hanging from the ceiling. There were a limited number of beds where the severely injured soldiers were lying, while most of the injured were on the floor, which was covered in hay. Many soldiers were crying and moaning in pain as the floor was stained with blood. 10 doctors dressed in white and wearing black aprons walked among the soldiers and seemed to be short on hands. As Alex approached, besides the stench of blood, the smell of alcohol being used as an antiseptic assaulted his nose as the doctors cleaned the soldiers' wounds. As Alex took note of everything, the soldiers were also watching Alex. Some of them were looking at Alex with respect and reverence. The king, who had been the laughingstock of everyone in the entire empire, now stood before them like an idol worthy of worship. Only those who stepped outside the walls and saw his strength knew his worth and myth. Your Majesty, the King of Nevin has arrived, shouted a more solid one who led them inside. The tales of his fight and the destructive movement with which he laid waste to the battlefield were still eager in their memories that had already spread throughout the facility. Of course, many were still skeptical about it as they were not present to witness the epic scene and were eager to see the king who used to be mentally retarded and a fatso. But after Alex's tall and long stature was filled with his unwavering gaze, they became encouraged. Having been in the military for years, one can tell with just one look that this man has shed buckets of sweat to reach the current state. Antoine and the group of soldiers who were saved by Alex stood up and shouted, "Hail to the King of Nevin!" Following suit, many tried to get up with their wounded and worn-out bodies and saluted him. Alex thanked them and nodded briefly. Although the atmosphere seemed quite lively, Alex was in a very bad mood. "Christina, what is this? Why is this place in such a bad state? Shouldn't the soldiers' treatment facility be clean and well maintained?" Alex asked in an irritated tone. Frank stepped in and spoke on behalf of Christina. "Your Majesty, this is just a temporary measure. The treatment center was far away from the city, but since all the people have been evacuated, we decided to use this place temporarily. Also, this isn't as bad as it seems," Frank explained, trying to calm Alex's anger. Alex massaged his forehead. He knew that science is still underdeveloped in this world, so these people don't care much about health and hygiene. If they knew about science and how such conditions can affect treatment, they would have hit their heads due to their ignorance. Most of the soldiers didn't die from injuries but from lack of proper sanitation. Even a person who had a 60% chance of survival can die from poor hygiene. Alex took a deep breath, drawing the stale air into his mouth, and held up his 5 fingers. 5 hours, Alex said, holding up his hand. "I want this whole damn place cleaned up. Make up the beds, no one is to lie on the straw. Uncle Mordek, please tell Max and the others to cut down the trees and make a temporary bed out of them. Get my men and clean this place up quickly, Your Highness. There are still wounded people there." "Where will they go?" Frank asked in a panicked tone. Even Christina, who was watching Alex silently, wanted to say something, but was interrupted by a sudden flash of light radiating from Alex's body. Chapter 107, Drink Your Fill. The entire place was illuminated by a greenish glow emanating from Alex's body. Alex's body shone and glowed brightly like a glittering diamond, and hymns of holiness seemed to reverberate from it. It seemed as if a holy angel descended to the ground to heal their pain. The soldiers felt the darkness creep into their bodies, and the pain they had been suffering from due to the grievous wound slowly began to subside. The blood dripping from the cuts and bruises stopped, and a layer of slimy patches began to wriggle around the wounds, causing them to begin to heal at an astonishing rate. Everyone looked at Alex's glowing body that radiated holiness and was astonished to such an extent that they were speechless. This was the first time they had seen a warrior capable of casting a large-scale healing spell, which was usually used by priests of the church. Alex's face began to turn pale as a sheet of paper. Casting large-scale healing spells took a toll on him and exhausted him greatly. The healing spell requires a large amount of mana, and casting it on a wider scale is more arduous than it seems. After a few moments, Alex's glow slowly dimmed, awakening all the soldiers from their stupor. Looking at Alex, everyone felt the urge to kneel before him. Alex retracted his aura, stood up, bowed his head slightly, and spoke in a voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you all for your hard work and sacrifice, thanks to which Wright, as well as Nevin, were able to survive." They were momentarily stunned upon hearing Alex's words, as this was the first time someone had thanked them for their hard work and sacrifices. "You don't need to thank us, Your Highness. It is our blessing and fortune to fight for our country, and it is an even greater fortune for us to fight alongside you, Your Highness." "Yes, Your Highness. Thank you for healing us." Loud cheers were heard for Alex as the soldier thanked him from the bottom of his heart. "My warriors, you have protected George's fortress and you deserve the glory we have won today, and you deserve a good rest too, so you can all relax a bit. Today's feast will be on Nevin's side. You will have a beer and roast pork. Enjoy it to your heart's content, boys," Alex shouted as he raised his hand. Frank frowned, tilted his head, and asked in a panicked tone, "Your Highness, we are in the middle of a war. We can't be careless now." "You worry too much, Frank. Let these tired ones enjoy it a bit. Besides, after taking a beating, I don't think they will attack us today." "But," Frank shouted as he looked at Christina, urging her to say something, but Christina simply looked away, trying to feign ignorance. "What the hell is going on? Who throws a party in a situation where there's a sword hanging over their head?" Frank screamed to himself. "By the way, Antoine, come with me," Alex ordered as he placed his hand on Antoine's shoulder. "I'm going to introduce you to another crazy bull. I mean someone similar to you. Maybe I can learn something from you," Alex muttered as he looked at Antoine with true eyes. This person was quite similar to Max, along with high potential and superior strength talent. These two crazy bulls will surely be a perfect match. While the situation was quite tense on the enemy side where countless calculations were being made, the soldiers on Alex's side had already wreaked havoc by drowning themselves in endless booze. The entire floor reeked of beer and rum, and fights broke out from time to time. While Mordek and Frank were discussing war strategies over a drink, Max was hiding in a corner as he wiped away his tears after being defeated by Antoine in an arm wrestling match. Wright and Nevin's soldiers tried to blend in with each other and blended perfectly with each other, painting a wonderful picture of brotherhood even though they had only just met. While everyone was passing out from being drunk, a certain figure who was just taking a small sip was quietly watching on as he observed the atmosphere. Seeing that everything was going well, he put on his cloak and covered his face with a veil, and sneaked out. He came to a small narrow passage and saw most of them sleeping after having drunk a lot, so he started walking outside. "Hey, hiccup. Hiccup. Was there?" The hooded man heard the sound of a soldier waking up from his sleep, but seeing him still drinking, he simply knocked him out and headed towards the predetermined meeting place. Dick. 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 Many men covered in dirt pushed their shovels into the ground, dug up the dirt, and threw it back. In front was the man who was hitting the rocks with his pickaxe and kept hitting as if he was possessed. If one watches him, one can get lost in thought as he sees his fascinating mining skills, as if this man was born into this world for mining and the art of mining runs through his blood. Alex, who was behind all of them, nodded in satisfaction and shouted, "Good job, Hugo. I will make sure to open a mining department and an association for the future legendary miners of this world. The title of legendary miner will belong to you. I don't think there's anyone in the world who can compare to your mining skill. Go on. My legendary mining boy." Applause. 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 Alex clapped and praised his legendary miner again and again. Beside him was Christina, her mouth agape watching the scene. Her cold and unfazed expression had already begun to crumble little by little after meeting Alex. Never in her life had she been so shocked as she was today, seeing Alex doing tricks one after another. If one didn't know him well, one might think that this guy had a bipolar personality. One moment he was laughing, clapping, and having fun, while the next moment his chilling gaze made you shiver. This guy was a surprise in itself. If one sticks with him, one must be careful of one's heart, otherwise, One might die of a heart attack because of this guy who can pull anything out of anywhere. Currently, Alex manipulated the earth with a spell changing its structure, and they were now beneath the ground of the plains before the fortress. Alex planned to dig the ground and form a huge pit to trap the enemy soldiers. Alex, who was overseeing the entire situation with a serious expression, suddenly smiled. Christina looked at Alex smiling and could see that Alex was trying to hold back his laughter, but was unable to do so. What happened? Why are you laughing? Christina asked with a questioning look. Oh, nothing. It's just that the chess piece that was playing from both sides is making a move, Alex said as he looked at them on a sensor screen in front of him and saw a dot moving away from the fortress. I see. Christiana's words rang out, filled with eternal coldness and anger. My lady, leave it to me. Alex slapped his chest with his right hand and spoke, greeting Christina. Please give this humble servant of yours a chance to prove himself and play as he pleases. Christina sighed as she watched Alex act, but she could sense a brutal, chilling cruelty hidden behind the mask of the smile. She was sure that the traitor was going to suffer a cruel fate. Chapter 108, Soldier. You did a splendid job. Under the complete darkness of the night, a dark figure was running across the plains. The sound of his faint footsteps broke the silence of the night along with the rustling noise that was created when his body passed through the tall grass and bushes. He slowed down as he reached the riverbank and looked around for a moment, turning his back and leaning against an old tree trunk. He sensed that there was a man on the other side and knocked on the trunk to let him know. Alpha code, do you have the man's identity? A faint sound was heard from the other side of the tree. The man was wearing a similar outfit while his face was covered with a cloak. That armed man who caused havoc is the King of Nevin. The entire atmosphere fell silent for a moment. Thinking that there would be no response from the other side, the traitor coughed a few times. Alpha code is sure about that? The other man asked with a questioning look. Although Emmett knew the news that the King of Nevin had recovered from his mental retardation, there was no news that he had gone to right to directly help. Besides, should it just be his troops? How could the king march onto the battlefield so early and no one knew anything about it? I'm 100% sure of it. It's the King of Nevin. According to rumors, he came for Christina. Understood, the man spoke up and further asked, any news about tomorrow? Yes, I have good news. Amidin had a great chance to counterattack. All of Wright and Nevin's soldiers are celebrating now and have been drinking, even the guards manning the walls were too drunk to keep their eyes open. So you mustn't miss the chance now. If they attack with all their might, surely everyone will have a chance to take down the fortress. Most of them couldn't even lift their weapons, let alone fight properly. The King of Nevin is still a mentally retarded and an idiot. Who can throw a banquet and order soldiers to drink their fill in the middle of war? Also, the King of Nevin is an arrogant guy. He said that this small army of Amidin's minions is worth a fart. He can kill them even when he's asleep and beat them like dogs. Quickly, report the situation to your superior and hurry up. The traitor urged to attack the fortress as quickly as possible under the darkness of the night. Alright, I'll tell the commander everything. After we take down the fortress as promised, you'll be under his command and your statutes will be eased until you become nobles. The man on the other side spoke and quickly left. Phew, the man exhaled heavily and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He had been walking a tightrope by betraying Wright's soldiers, but there wasn't a shred of regret in his heart because White's fall paved the way for his rise. So, in order to improve his future and that of the next generation, he had to take that risk, but in the end, he was certain that Amidin would crush Wright and win the war easily. The man heard the sound of footsteps retreating and finally decided to leave. Today will be the last day of his fight, the last day of his miserable life, and the next day will mark the new beginning, a life full of riches. A slight smile appeared on his face as he thought of the bright future that awaited him, but he had barely taken a step when a hand appeared on his shoulder and wrapped around his neck. The man shrugged and tried to shake off the unknown person and escape from his clutches. Woof. Woof. Dude. Calm down a bit. I got lost and forgot the way to the fortress. The man heard a soft, gentle voice and turned his head to see who appeared beside him. But as soon as his eyes met the person who appeared beside him, his entire existence trembled in fear and he felt as if his soul had escaped, leaving his body behind. Beside him was no one but the King of Nevin himself, who was smiling brightly, showing his white teeth that were brimming with radiance. Although he couldn't see his figure properly under the darkness of the night, he could still see the glowing red eyes of a predator. Alex raised the torch with his other hand to illuminate the area so the man could see him more clearly. Your Majesty, the man shouted in a trembling voice. "My dear friend and brave warrior, what are you doing here in this lonely place?" Alex asked in an angelic voice. I came here to shit. I mean, shit more than piss, dude. Why do you have to piss here in this place?" Alex said as he looked around to see if this place was full of shit. "I just came for a walk, but I felt like taking a shit, so I went over to the river to finish the job." Alex controlled his urge to laugh out loud as he saw the man trembling in fear as he said everything that came to his mind. "I see." Alex nodded with an understanding look and stared into the man's eyes and spoke with a sweet angelic voice. "Soldier, you did your job splendidly. You've done your part very well, my friend, and you've made my job quite easy. Without it, I don't know how I would be able to catch the enemy. People like you are a gift from God. I wish I had more people like you on my side, but damn it, these people don't have balls of steel like you do," Alex said and softly smiled at his face and held his chin. "Since your job is done, please rest in peace, my traitor friend. I will make sure that others urinate on your corpse to give you a special tribute." Alex's voice echoed like a death knell in the man's ears, which was followed by a loud and shrill deathly howl scream that shook the entire place. Inside the Amidin army camp. The commander snapped his fingers as he thought carefully. Besides him was a squad of generals present. He was already pissed off by his troops' performance. All the master ranks had been killed, leaving behind these useless scum. After weighing the pros and cons, he finally opened his eyes. Their food and ration reserves had been burned, so they couldn't last more than a day and a half. Therefore, they had to take down the fortress within the stipulated time, and this opportunity came at the perfect time, knocking on their doors. He had to take the risk or wait for his death. "Prepare the army, march. I will be the one to lead everything now. We will attack with all remaining forces," the commander ordered as he explained things. Wearing black chainmail armor, which perfectly matched the darkness of the night, he advanced. They still had over 2,000 soldiers left, which was more than enough to lay waste to everything. Plus, with how unprotected the fortress was today, he was sure that they might not even know how they died. But his confidence didn't last more than 10 minutes when a huge explosion rocked them, dealing them a tremendous blow. A nightmare that would be etched into the bones of the surviving soldiers and haunt their existence for their entire lives. Unfortunately, that would only happen if any of them survived. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109, Fire in the Hole. A huge concentrated mass of soldiers was marching under the faint glow of the moon. From high up in the sky, only a blackish mass could be seen covering the ground. It looked as if a huge number of black ants were moving towards the destined location in an orderly and coordinated manner. The faint sound of cracking and breaking twigs slowly spread out as they marched towards the fortress. The ground slowly began to rumble, which started to create tremors that slowly advanced towards the fortress. Leading them was a commander who stood at the front with a huge and fearsome scythe, and from his body radiated a terrifying and ghastly aura that was enough to scare everyone. The commander noticed that there was no reaction from the fortress and thought that the information was correct. There weren't even any fire torches atop the walls that had already been extinguished, and since everyone was drunk and tipsy, no one was awake to light the fire torches. He sighed in relief upon seeing this. At that moment, he was completely confident in the information he had obtained from the traitor. But his keen senses suddenly felt that something was amiss, and he turned his HUD from side to side, but still, he was unable to put his finger on it. But as he and the soldiers approached the fortress, his attention was drawn towards the sound that echoed out every time they took a step. Letting the soldiers pass, he stopped on the spot and increased his vigilance as he examined the sound of footsteps hitting the ground. His brows furrowed and his expression became distorted as he felt like they were walking on a hollow piece of land instead of a sturdy ground surface. "What's going on?" he muttered to himself as he asked himself the question that was brutally answered the next instant. Standing in front of an underground hole that had been dug recently, Alex stood with a serious expression. On his back was a large sword and another normal longsword at his waist. A terrifying aura could be felt radiating from him, which was enough to send a chill down one's spine. Christina, who was beside him, looked at him with a surprised expression, as Alex had been standing there for over an hour as if he was looking at something in front of him, but he couldn't find anything. Although he was standing there like a statue, he would occasionally crack some jokes or say some shameless words, But suddenly, as if his entire existence changed, his expression became serious, and his warm and gentle eyes suddenly became as sharp as a sword as a murderous glint flashed in his eyes. Christina, who was wondering what was going on, suddenly felt slight tremors and saw the earth slowly sliding off the ceiling. Snap! Alex snapped his fingers and Christina, as if she understood everything, nodded her head and ran out. Coming out of the pit, she took the bow, loaded it with an arrow and after raising it, shot it into the night sky. A small flash of radiant golden light pierced the total darkness of the night. Seeing this, many soldiers and magicians who were hiding in the bushes jumped into the trenches assigned to them. There were about 20 squads and each squad consisted of 8 archers and 1 magician. The archers jumped into the trench and raised their bows towards the canal passage leading to a huge open area. Alex together with his squad dug a passage leading to an underground place beneath the plain, and after making sure of the thickness of the ground on the left, he dug a huge open space with the help of the magicians and soldiers, under the guidance of the legendary miner whose goal was to dig deep to the center of the world. After digging, Alex and the wizard used earth magic to form many huge and sturdy pillars, to prevent the ground and the top surface from collapsing. Alex even added a few gallons of oil and grease along with sharp rocky stagnations that jutted upwards with a sharp edge. He wanted to add spears and sharp-edged weapons but due to his deficiency, he was forced to add rocky spears and stagnations. After that, he made many small passages and trenches leading to this place. The archers raised their arrows while the mages chanted a spell, due to which many small magic circles appeared before the arrows. The archers pulling the string fired the arrows which lit up as they passed through the magic circles, and their speed increased greatly. After casting the minor fire spell, the mages tried to fire a strong spell to destroy the pillar. Alex, who was alone, aimed his arrow at the huge central pillar. He was the only one who could break such a huge pillar from afar with his archery and magic skills. As he loaded the arrow, lightning began to shoot out from his body and the air around him began to spin violently, creating a strong gust of wind. The wind began to condense before his arrows and formed a tight vortex made of a concentrated mass of air. Alex leaned his body back as he shifted all of his weight to his back to handle the rebound. Fire in the pit, drawing the bow to its limit, he shot the arrow that was covered in lightning. Ring! The bow of the arrow produced a pleasant sound, as if the strings of a harmonium had been pulled tight, and following that, the arrow that emerged from the bow shot forward like a missile. Swish! The arrowhead broke the sound barrier and the sound of breaking glass reverberated in the enclosed place and echoed throughout the underground place, transmitting everywhere. Boo! A huge explosion occurred as soon as the terrifying arrow collided with a pillar, and it burst into pieces emitting a deafening roar followed by many chains of explosions taking place one after another, lighting up the entire underground space in an instant. The oil and grease added by Alex ignited the fire, increasing the intensity of the explosion. While Alex was doing his job making fire in the hole, the army marching towards the fortress felt that the ground had loosened, which was quite strange. They didn't even have time to wonder what was going on when a huge and deafening roar resounded throughout the place. Boo! An earth-shaking explosion occurred and the ground suddenly cracked, fissures forming as fire began to gush out from these cracks like spring water gushing out from underground. The soldiers who were in the pit's radius and standing above it were thrown off by the impact and their bodies were sent flying a few meters into the air, but as they fell, there was no solid ground for them to land on and their bodies fell into the massive pit that was burning with a cloud of flames that gave off a scorching temperature enough to burn a human. The scene looked as if everyone had been thrown into a pit of fire, and it wouldn't be wrong to say that hell had descended upon them. A hell that was going to swallow them whole without leaving anything behind. Chapter 110, The Burning Pit of Hell. Alex stepped forward with a smirk as he saw the enemy commando's surprised expression. He raised his hand and clapped twice. Many torches were lit at once, and the soldiers in front gave way to see Antoine advancing holding a huge spear, and on top of it was a head nailed to it. Soldiers, salute this man who sacrificed himself for our victory by passing on misinformation. Great men like him deserve some respect, Alex said and started clapping, and all the other soldiers followed his idea. The commander couldn't believe that such a young boy who hadn't even awakened his full set of teeth yet would have left him alone. Drunk, scattered, unable to hold their swords. If those fully armed soldiers glaring at him are drunk, then what was he? This was clearly a ploy by this bastard. He burned all the food reserves, which would surely pressure them into making a hasty decision that they had already made and were now regretting greatly. On top of that, this man not only found out the identity of the traitor, but also used the traitor as his own pawn to pass him wrong information and trap him here. And what was more infuriating to him was that he fell into the trap of his enemies, a trap led by a young boy who used to be an idiot. It felt like he had been slapped in the face in front of a large crowd. This humiliation he suffered could only be erased with the death of this boy. The commander's face turned plum red from anger, and he stopped on the ground to take a huge leap and slashed his scythe at the opposing forces, sending out a gigantic arc of light. Pressure emanated from the arc hole above the soldiers, giving them a suffocating feeling. They all stared at the gigantic arc of swords descending upon them. The massive arc of fire that shot out from the commander's side gave off an enormous pressure that sunk them down and forced them to crouch. The attack had overwhelmed them and possibly even swept many of them away. But before the arc could come down, Alex appeared before the joint army of Nevin and Wright. A fierce burst of aura completely enveloped him. Alex placed his hand on the hilt of the sword as he rotated his shoulder blade and dragged his left foot back. Clenching the hilt of the sword that was shrouded in a reddish hue, he drew his sword. First stance of the heavy iron swordsman, quick draw, Alex muttered as he drew the sword from the scabbard that formed a beautiful semicircle in the air. Alex slashed with all his might, which caused his muscles to bulge outwards along with veins that looked as if they were going to burst. Shit. A soft, sharp, and shrill sound similar to air being cut was heard, followed by which the air in front of Alex was cut into pieces and a fierce tempest emerged from Alex's body that swept away everything around him. The huge arc of fire that was descending suddenly stopped as if it met with strong resistance. In the next second, a deafening thunderclap rumbled and the arc was cut into two halves. A strong gale erupted from Alex's body with tremendous power that sent the two split halves flying into the night sky, where it exploded. A cross-shaped light flashed in the night sky, illuminating the entire sky of the place for a second due to the detonation of the attack. Boo-hoo-hoo. The entire cloud was engulfed in flames along with a thunderous noise accompanied by the enemy commander's mad roar. King of Nevin. I'm going to destroy you completely, a piece of shit, like you should be killed and crushed before you can even spread your wings, the enemy commander roared with all his might. Alex scoffed at the man's words and shouted, I can see where that mad confidence comes from. A mid-epic rank warrior. No, you're a pseudo-epic rank warrior. You surely could have won the battle, but Alice, you met your match, Alex said in a lamenting tone. Your fate was sealed from the moment you set foot here. Although Alex spoke as if nothing happened, he was on guard from the moment he sensed this man's strength. A pseudo-epic ranker is stronger than a mid-epic ranker and could even win a confrontation with an early epic ranker. Although it sounds great, one had to endure enormous repercussions to enter that realm. Even if you become more powerful compared to the strength you possess at the current rank, from this point onwards you will never be able to advance. Thus, only those who have no choice but to advance due to their low potential and were knocked into a low rank without any hope of advancing, usually resort to such measures. But since most people didn't know about it, they simply stared at the person in bewilderment. As soon as everyone heard Alex's words, their eyes widened in horror and looked at the enemy camp commander with shock and disbelief. Not to mention the soldier on Nevin's side, even the Ammon army looked at their commander with a look of astonishment. They were shocked by a sudden revelation. They had always thought that their commander was a master-ranked warrior, but he was a pseudo-epic ranked one. To the lower-level kingdoms, the epic-ranked warrior is akin to God, whom they worship and revere wherever they go. The enemy commander smiled a big smile on his face and shouted, "Since you know all this, why don't you surrender? You should know that any resistance is useless in the face of the power of an epic-ranked one. You can face the master-ranked one before, but the epic-ranked one is on a completely different level. You should know the name of the person who killed you." "Right, I am Heron, commander of the Ammon army. Since you know my name, just ee." The commander roared at the top of his lungs and in one great leap charged at Alex as bursts of crimson fire surrounded his scythe. "In your dreams," Alex shouted and lunged forward. He put down the small sword and pulled out a huge sword from his back. With each step they took, the ground shook and cracks began to spread everywhere, as if something weighing a ton had been pressed into the ground. Lightning began to erupt from Alex, increasing his movement speed and his body moving like a flash. Heron's technique was fierce and direct without carrying with it any merciless blows, arriving before Alex and slashing with the sharp edge of his scythe. Alex stopped dead in his tracks, and the sudden stop caused all the momentum he carried to shoot forward. Bringing the greatsword behind him, he harnessed the force of his momentum, and as if powerful waves of the sea were crashing against the shore, the muscles in his arms expanded as he charged forward with all his might in the midst of a fierce path. Even before the two weapons could meet, Heron's scythe slash tore through the air before Alex, cutting him into two halves, and the enormous strength of Alex's sword erupted and both weapons collided with each other. But if one looked closely, there was a narrow gap between the two weapons that neither of them could break through, and within that gap was a massive amount of energy intertwined. A burst of fire and lightning flashed from the gap that had been condensed to its limit. The temperature of the surroundings began to heat up as flickering lightning began to surge forth from the clash. Both Alex and Heron roared as they attempted to overpower each other in the clash and push the other back. Finally, the gap was broken and the two weapons collided with each other with a powerful, earth-shaking clash. For a moment after the clash, time seemed to stop and a deathly silence lingered for a moment, but that moment of calm and peace didn't last long. First, the ground began to tremble as cracks were generated due to the earth shaking. Rocks began to vibrate fiercely and burst apart. Then a massive sphere of enveloping air met with both warriors in the center, followed by the sound of the sky crumbling. Boo! Chapter 111, Fierce Clash. Flames erupted from the fissures that enveloped the soldiers falling into the pit. A small chain of explosions began to ring out at regular intervals, like the sound of an alarm clock ringing out the death toll for the enemies. The falling soldiers were hit by the cloud of flames that erupted from below, burning them to charcoal. Many tried to use mana to cover themselves and protect themselves from the fire, but it also proved futile, as although they were able to save themselves from the erupting flames, they fell into a pit filled with burning oil that fried them as the sharp, shiny edges of the rocks pierced their bodies, making a bloody wound on their body. Blood gushed out from their wounds like a fountain that was instantly evaporated by the hot flames. A fierce, shrill scream with a heart-rending cry began to echo all around, breaking the deathly silence of the night. Screams filled with misery and agony made the hairs on the listener's body stand on end and sounded like a horrible nightmare that no one wished to experience in their life. A burning smell wafted through the air, carried by the gentle breeze blowing by and reeking of rotting corpses. Even the soldiers of Nevin and Wright saw the terrible scene of mass destruction, which unconsciously made their hearts tear and shudder for a moment. They even felt compassion for the other side. The huge burning scene of the opposing enemy seemed like the poetry of the flames that had adorned the starry scene, illuminating the entire place as they cleared away the darkness of the night. The only thing that was out of place was that instead of logs and woods, humans were used as materials to complete the final piece of the masterpiece. The image of the hellfire pit filled with a tormented soul is a story that everyone has heard, where the devil punishes the sinner by burning them in a hellfire pit. And now they were witnessing the scene where fantasy met reality, painting this disastrous picture that made one tremble with fear. A fifth of Amidon's army marching forward fell into the fiery pit, while the remaining stepped back in fear of seeing such a scene. The mages at the back tried to spray water and cast water spells, while the soldiers tried to dig the ground and threw sand into the boiling pool, but all was in vain as the fire would not go out. Many reached out their hands towards their falling comrades, trying to lift them up, but instead, they were dragged down into the horrific hellhole. Unable to do anything, they watched as their comrade was helplessly burned to death. Arg! Save me. God, please have mercy on us. This pain is too much for us to bear. Oh, God! Screams and howls sounded like a deafening roar. Christina stared at the burning pit with an uneasy expression. Although her hands were stained with blood and she had killed many, she had killed them all quickly. And the death she was witnessing was an absolute torment that can break one's spirit. Many regard battle as sacred and recognize it as glory to die on the battlefield. But seeing the scene before her, she thought that there was nothing but glory. The people in front of her were dying, screaming at the top of their lungs, their bodies burning up, inflicting excruciating pain on them that even shook their souls in agony. Furthermore, every single one of them was tortured to death, and their death cry echoed out even after their bodies were burned to ashes. This was too brutal, too horrifying. Christina looked at Alex, who was still watching the scene with a stoic expression. Even a person like her who doesn't know how to express her emotions felt sorry for them. After all, killing them is one thing, but killing them in such a horrible way was another, so she was thinking about how Alex was currently feeling after thinking of such a horrible idea that led to such a demise. Christina's senses had been sharpened by countless battles and life or death crises, which had helped her sharpen her senses and vaguely understand what kind of people others are. From the way Alex talked, joked, and laughed, Christina could feel a sense of helplessness filled with unspoken misery that seemed as if she had lost a precious aspect of her life that she was trying to find once again, a broken heart that was screaming to be mended. She didn't know why Alex felt this way, but she concluded one thing: That Alex might seem like a harmless monster who had no desire to kill, but once provoked, he would bring out all the untold misery buried deep within his heart and use it to sharpen the edges of his sword, to prepare the blade for a massacre. And every time her expression turned serious, hell was going to be unearthed. Alex noticed Christina's gaze and sighed as he understood what Christina was thinking. Christina rarely shows any expression except her stoic, empty gaze, but once she does, it's pretty easy to read. He didn't want to do this kind of thing, but he feels like the world was going to force him to fight sooner or later. Besides, if he doesn't go around looking for a fight, these bastards will surely come for him one way or another. Alex exhaled heavily, raised his hand, and shouted, "Soldier, fire the arrows, let's end their miseries. Let's end their suffering once and for all." Alex's voice amplified the mana even more and echoed throughout the place. The archer pulled the string tight and fired the arrows to end the sorrows of the opposing forces. Swish! 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 The arrows tore through the air in front of them and made a sound like cutting paper. They soared high into the sky and fell into the fire pit. The arrows fell and pierced through the screaming soldiers and ended their lives. The soldier who was running over here with flames engulfing his body as he tried to get out of the place looked up to see many small black dots appearing in the sky and falling down on them like rain. Arg! The arrows stuck into the enemies, who clung to their lives even though they were burned by the flames. An indignant roar accompanied by wild screams came from the dying soldiers. Blood spurted out from their bodies, which were instantly burned and vaporized by the flames, giving off a disgusting feeling that may make one want to vomit. Amidst a panicked cry, a shrill roar erupted from the fire pit and a figure soared into the night sky. He shrugged, his body emitting strong gales that drove the flames away from his body. Jumping out of the fire pit, he looked around and saw many soldiers pouring out of the trenches. "How?" he asked with a shocked expression, unable to understand how such a calamity had befallen him. Chapter 112, Let the War Begin. An explosion that can only be described as catastrophic shook the entire battlefield. The massive sphere of concentrated air began to expand by several meters in length and fiercely exploded outwards, illuminating the place as if a mini-sun had been born beneath the starless abyss of the night that swept across the entire battlefield, striking fear into the hearts of observers. The ground crumbled, unable to withstand such a ferocious blow, while cracks and fissures began to spread radially outwards from the side of impact. Fire and lightning entangled with each other and erupted in the form of a shockwave that was carried by the mass of air that blew around. The soldiers watching the spectacle nearly closed their eyes upon seeing the blinding flash of light. Many were thrown into the air and pushed several steps back by the strong shock waves coming from the point of impact. Two figures wrapped in flames flew out from the impact, leaving behind a trail of smoke, and both landed on the ground with a loud impact. Garza felt as if he had been hit by a giant hammer that made his fingers numb, and he couldn't bend them for a few moments. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe the terrifying force that struck him from the warrior who was just an insignificant disciple. Furthermore, this person was simply mentally retarded, and although he had only recently started training, he shouldn't have achieved this kind of strength. This was simply outrageous. The only possible explanation he could think of was that Alex von Stan hadn't been mentally retarded for a long time, and it could all be a rumor. Who knows? This man may have become normal a few years ago and secretly trained himself so as not to alert his enemies. Furthermore, he might be hiding his realm to make opponents lower their guard and attack them. After all, he had already been caught by this man who laid out a grand plan to deploy all his forces. Alex panted heavily after receiving the attack head-on. The enemy's range had gone beyond his estimation, and although Alex was confident of defeating him, that wouldn't come without a price. After all, defeating opponents beyond range isn't as easy as it seems. Plus, the way things are going, his forces might lose their lives from being caught up in the fight. Alex turned around and saw that many soldiers had nearly lost their balance due to the impact earlier, while many had been pushed back and had lost their senses for a moment. Turning his attention towards Heron, he shouted, "Let's take this fight somewhere else." Alex leapt towards Heron immediately after saying those words while looking at Christina to give him the signal to take over the forces. Heron didn't want to listen to this man's suggestion, but he had to. After all, he had already lost a lot of his forces due to the fire pit, and if they keep clashing here, these pathetic scums might die from the shockwaves alone. The two of them ran away from the fortress, allowing others to breathe in the air of relief as they tried to calm themselves down after the two monsters left. Christina took the order in her hands and unsheathed her sword with a fierce shout. Blow the trumpet of war. We've all been on the defensive for a while now. Now it's time to go on the offensive at full speed. Draw your swords, raise your shields, raise the flag, and slay the enemies. The blood of these enemies will be the nourishment for our bright future. Let the war begin. Christina's loud speech echoed in the soldiers' ears, causing their blood to boil with excitement and rage. They were fed up with staying within the walls while fending off these invaders, but now it was time to feast. Time to feast on the enemy's blood. A loud crashing sound was heard as the soldiers who were hiding in the trenches and amongst the bushes emerged. The metals of their shields, weapons, and armor clashed as they began to move in a huge mass. Rumble. Rumble. The ground began to rumble and the trembling of the ground reached those on the other side. The generals of Amadon took command and ordered the soldiers to avenge their brothers who died cruelly under the command of these cowardly bastards who used cheap tricks. We will take revenge for our fallen brothers. We seek revenge. The soldiers on Amadon's side charged at the arriving soldiers on Wright and Nevin's side. Christina divided her army into two halves due to the large pit of fire in the middle, and both flanks split into two halves and marched towards the enemy forces. Frank, who was leading the left flank, shouted fiercely. His Majesty had created this opportunity for us and had arranged everything in advance. Before the sun's rays can pierce through the darkness, I want all the enemy's heads to roll on the ground. Kill them all. Frank roared and unsheathed his sword and leapt towards the enemy forces. Mordek, who was leading the right flank, wanted to follow the others' ideas and shouted, "Go ahead. Kill them all." Cough. Cough. But unfortunately the words were stuck in his throat and forced him to cough violently, thus ruining that epic moment and his moment of glory. Max, who was running beside Mordek, said, "Uncle Mordek, you're too old to be giving passionate speeches. Leave everything to a young man like me. You just put a bed and a couch aside and enjoy watching the fight. You." Mordek's face turned red with anger. He never imagined that the day would come when some young man would suggest him to retire from the war due to his advanced age. Mordek, instead of attacking the enemy, jumped towards Max and kicked him in the back. Max felt a strong force from behind that hit his butt hard and his body shot out towards the enemy forces like a cannon. "Show me the strength of a young man that you brag about so much," Mordek shouted as he kicked Max with all his might as if he were a soccer ball. "No." Max's miserable scream echoed as his body shot out like a meteor towards the enemy force. With a rapid speed, Max's body collided with the enemy formation and crashed into the shield as he charged at them, taking a part of the formation and making a hole in the formation, allowing Mordek and other soldiers to take advantage of the opportunity. Chapter 113, Crazy Max. Tink. 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 A clanging sound echoed all around as Max's body slammed into the enemy formation and slid off the ground a few meters. Max felt as if the world was spinning around him as he tried to stand up. "This old Gramps is too brutal. The old man gets nervous too quickly. He should speak carefully now," Max muttered and raised his head to see two maces hitting his face. "Shit," Max shouted and pulled out his double-edged axe and used it as a shield to defend himself. Explosion. Explosion. Max felt a strong force hitting him and caused the ground to crack. "Get out of here," Max roared and pushed the two men back, sending them flying with a kick. The soldiers surrounding him raised their spears and threw them at Max with astonishing speed. Max rolled his eyes at the sight of spears approaching around him and sneered. "I'm no longer the Max I used to be. I was once known as a lumberjack, but now, after awakening mana with the help and blessing of the king, I will be known as the Human Cutter." Max roared as a strong glow enveloped his body and the axe in his hand turned into a gray shadow and spun crazily, tearing apart the air and even the space around him. Thump. 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 Max's axe spun at high speed as he swung it in a circular motion with all his might. Boom. Many shrill, heart-wrenching screams rang out and blood spurted into the sky and fell back down as if it was raining blood. The huge sharp double-edged axe shattered the spears as the tip of the spears came into contact with the axe, and the spears were cut apart, emitting sparks of fire everywhere. But it didn't stop there as strong and sharp wind blades were generated from the axe. Like a sharp knife cutting through a piece of flesh and like a brute force from the sky coming down and crushing everything, the wind blades emitted from the axe charged through, tearing the spears apart and striking the wielder, shattering them and their body splitting into two halves. The soldiers behind the spear wielder raised their shields to defend them, but when the wind blades collided with the shield after carrying the remaining momentum, it exploded and they were blown away like dry leaves in a storm. Unstoppable. Like an unstoppable maniac, Max swung his axe and moved across the battlefield like the blades of a moving engine. The huge axe chopped everything in its path into pieces, and it didn't look like an axe, but rather a punishment from the god of war, who had passed the death sentence of these people to this executioner to cut off their heads. With its unstoppable momentum and devastating power, it seemed like Max would crush even a master ranker into pieces if he fell into his hands. Blood spurted out and scattered everywhere, as if it were water. Broken limbs, arms, and severed heads fell everywhere and decorated the battlefield, causing the formation to fall into chaos. Max, who was at the center of the chaos after spinning in a circular motion for a few moments, felt dizzy and one of his feet tripped, causing him to change the direction of rotation and lose his balance due to a wind blade being shot in the wrong direction. Instead of heading towards the enemy, he charged towards the soldiers of his own side who were at the rear. "Shit, Max, if I make it out of here alive I'll skin you, you bastard. This madman." The soldiers who saw this screamed in horror as they ran backwards. Some even fell to the ground and hid so as not to get caught in the arc of the wind blades. Fortunately, before the mistakenly fired wind blade could cause any more destruction, Mordek appeared and slashed the wind blade and neutralized it. "You moron. What the hell are you doing?" Mordek screamed at the top of his lungs and charged at Max and let out a series of curses that caused his saliva to drench Max. Mordek panted heavily after cursing at will in the middle of the battlefield. The enemy soldiers tried to take advantage of this opportunity and infiltrated to attack the two of them, but they were torn apart even before they could reach them. Anyone who came within a 5-meter radius was brutally crushed and slashed by this duo who were engaged in a heated argument. Eventually, they stopped thinking that this could be a plan these two came up with to lower their guard, and they might have a technique that required these two to work in pairs, allowing them to kill anyone who stopped within a certain radius of their arc. So they ignored them and attacked others. Although it was a misunderstanding, this gives Mordek a chance to make Max understand his mistake, which was no less than a crime on the battlefield. "I'm sorry, I understand my mistake. I will engrave this deep in my heart," Max said as he lowered his head in shame. Mordek nodded. "Now go and kick some ass," Mordek shouted as he kicked Max's ass once again. "Do you have anything to do with kicking ass?" Max roared in pain as he rubbed his ass. The right flank and left flank that were split into two halves due to the large hellhole began to clear the way and were now reaching the other side and converging once again. Blood spurted out and screams of death could be heard around the soldiers, sounding like a song of terror. The front layer of Amidon soldiers lost their protection and fell like crops under the sickle-shaped weapons. The battle that started as an even one had turned into a one-sided massacre. The Amidon soldiers, who had been in an offensive position since day one, had now become passive, and the roles of both sides had now been inconceivably revered. Unable to hold on any longer, one of the generals, who was fighting alongside, took out an artifact. "The commander gave it to me to use in case things go bad," the general muttered and pressed the button on the device, unleashing a plague that was not to be released. Chapter 114, Unleashing the Plague. Max, who was spinning around with his double-edged axe, heard a loud bang, and an enemy flew towards him like a bullet. Max sensed the danger, and without blinking he raised his axe and slashed at the thing coming towards him. Shit. A reddish liquid fell on him, soaking his armor with blood as he slashed at the man. Killing him, he looked around and saw Antoine approaching him with a mocking smile as he criticized everything he did. With a huge leap, Antoine landed next to Max and shouted, "Max Xii. Were you able to kill any, or do you need this master's help?" Antoine spoke with a huge smile on his face. "In your dreams," Max shouted as he slashed his axe. "Shall we compete and see who can kill the most?" Antoine suggested as he raised his huge hammer in the air. "Alright, let's compete, even if it's useless, because I'll be the one to win," Max shouted and chuckled. "Only time will tell," Antoine muttered as they both took a fighting stance with a serious expression. They were about to take a step forward when they heard a loud click. "Ah! What is this?" they both thought at the same time. Following the loud metallic sound, a chain of metallic clangs began to ring out. Click! Click! Clicking noises resounded everywhere, followed by panicked screams. Arg! Wild screams began to erupt from all around, which scared everyone for a moment. They looked around to see that the metal collar on the Amidon soldier's vest burst, and a dark greenish gas rose up, which was directly inhaled by the Amidon soldiers. Max looked at the scene with a frown and his eyes widened in horror. "No, that can't be it," Max almost screamed as he thought of the horrible scenarios that would come next, and made his entire body tremble and the hairs on his skin stand up in fright. Max and other Nevin soldiers' expressions distorted as they saw the changes happening around them. Mordek, who was looking around, frowned and shouted, "Take a step back and retreat to a safe distance, don't inhale the gas," Mordek ordered. Most of the Nevin soldiers guessed what was going on and covered their noses with one hand and ran back, leaving the right soldiers clueless about it. Huh? What happened? The soldiers under Frank's command on the left flank noticed the changes but didn't understand what was happening and fell asleep for a moment, which proved quite detrimental. The shield bearers standing in front inhaled some of the dark greenish gas and felt a tingling sensation creeping up from their back. Their vision became cloudy, their eyes became bloodshot, veins bulged all over their body, and their senses became dulled, followed by a sudden burst of searing pain. They screamed and fell to their knees. As the inhaled gas entered their system, the mana within their body began to churn and twist in its vessel. It felt like something was pushing through a narrow, rough path, causing too much pain. I will. What happened to you? One of the soldiers shouted his friend's name and tried to lift him up, who was in pain, but when he came closer and tried to lift Will up, Will hid him. Arg, he moaned in pain as Will hit him and bit his hand like a mad dog and jumped on him while trying to pin him down. After pinning him down, he started biting his friend to death. This scene is repeated everywhere on the left flank as his own allies lose control and try to take the lives of their friends by biting and clawing at them like animals. Christina, seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, suddenly intervened and raised her sword into the air and slashed. A dazzling golden light shot out from her sword, which rose high into the sky and split into many parts and shot towards the frantic people. Swish! 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 The golden light changed its appearance into a sword and crashed into the frenzied people and threw them away. Quickly retreat, gather here, leave those who have gone mad. Don't lose your lives because of your stupidities, Christina shouted and jumped towards Mordek and asked him to explain what was going on and how he knew. Mordek took a deep breath and explained everything to Christina and Frank as his forces began to retreat while the scream of Amidon's forces along with his soldiers filled the vast land. Wait. Let me confirm one thing for you, Christina asked as her attention was drawn to a particular spot. You said that Alex and his team cleaned everything up. Doesn't that mean that they might have inhaled some of the gases as well, so they weren't affected by that poisonous gas? Christina asked, raising her eyebrows. No, they weren't affected. From what I was told, it takes time for it to take effect, Mordek spoke up and explained. Also, the weaker ones are affected first and those who are not awake are not affected by this. But witnessing things here, I'm 100% sure that the gas they're currently using is more potent than the ones your highness has found. Certainly the speed of effect has increased, which could prove to be quite disadvantageous for us if we inhale it, Mordek said as he rubbed his chin. Christina's expression stiffened upon hearing Mordek's words and a deep sigh escaped her lips. That was why her guard couldn't be let down for even a minute. Just moments ago, they were in a rather favorable position and the tide of the war had turned again. Previously, Christina had thought that they would win the war before dawn, but now that they have to kill every single one of these people who have lost their senses and turned into monsters, it's bound to take too much time and the soldiers will be exhausted from fighting these maniacs who don't even feel pain. Furthermore, the noxious gas is driving all of our soldiers mad. It was fortunate that the Nevin soldiers knew this, otherwise they wouldn't even know how they died under the poison gas. Christina closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about the next step. She calculated several possible ways to counter things. Since it's gas, it might work, Christina muttered as her golden eyes shone dazzlingly. Mages use wind spells to draw poisonous gases out of a place, create a tornado or something similar, and gather the gas in one place, then cast wind spells and lift it into the sky. We'll get rid of this gas first, but before that, create a layer of mud in front of us to prevent these frenzied humans from coming here. Anyone below the middle disciple rank stays back and leaves the front formation to the stronger ones. Meanwhile, the archers take up their positions. Uncle Mordek and Frank, get ready to follow me. We'll take care of those who tried to break through. Everyone try to hold your breathing as long as you can and close your nose and wait until the mages remove the gas. Christina gave a series of orders in quick succession as she decided to fight from the front. Chapter 115, Unleashing the Plague 2. Frank listened to Christina's orders and prepared to execute them, but before he did he stared at the horrifying sight of cannibalism where the Amidon soldiers didn't even spare their friends after completely losing their minds. Lady Christina, what about the soldiers on our side who got infected? Frank asked with an uneasy expression. Christina stared at Frank for a moment as she tried to steal her heart before giving the order. "Uncle Mordek, is there any way to cure them?" Christina asked as she looked at Mordek. Mordek shook his head and spoke with a terrible expression, "There isn't any for now." "Then we can't just leave them to fate. We can't risk the lives of those left to save those who have already been infected." Christina spoke, and following her words and orders, the wizards moved forward. The wizards raised their staff and began chanting spells at once. Many magic circles appeared in the sky at once and disappeared in an instant. Swish! 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 A gust of wind started up, followed by a light rustling of leaves accompanied by hymns of uprooted trees as the turbulent wind began to blow fiercely all over the place. Above them, a turbulent, circular overflow of air appeared, converging on one point, trying to draw the air into one place. The dark greenish gases emitted from the metal gusts on the Amidon soldiers' necklaces rose as they were swept up by the suction force created by rapid winds. The frantic soldiers fighting each other suddenly stopped and looked at the huge accumulation of winds that was forming a storm. The huge stormy winds, along with the violent screeching sound produced when the air brushed against their bodies, attracted their attention. Like zombies, they stopped their attack and advanced towards the center of the storm. Christina noticed their movements and raised her hand to signal the archer to shoot at them. Pick, 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 pick. A confectionery tune rang out as the strings vibrated after the arrows were released. The sharp arrowheads made a piercing noise as they pierced through the winds blowing at them as they tried to maintain their direction. The archers found it difficult to maintain their aim as their arrows were carried away by the strong gales, causing them to miss the proper targets. Those arrowheads we managed to gain against the tide of gales pierced the targets, pushing them back. Tack, 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 tack. Bang! The rain of arrows crushed many, and the frenzied soldiers fell to the ground with great thuds, but many ignored the pain and stood up. Blood was pouring out from the wounds caused by the piercing arrows. Still, there was no scream or bellow except a great growl coming from them. Some even have their heads being pierced by the arrows, with the arrowhead stabbing through them from the front and coming out from the back along with a fountain of blood, but it wasn't enough to kill them. It's surely necessary to completely crush them and squeeze the life out of them. Gulp. The soldiers watching the scene gulped after witnessing the brutal scene. It was a completely different battle compared to the battles they were used to, and they weren't even sure if this could be called a battle or not. Like a zombie that only had the urge to destroy everything in sight, they advanced while emitting wild screams. Christina raised her head as she checked the mage's progress in collecting the poisonous gases while waiting for the opportune moment. The frantic soldiers began to reach the first line of defense and charged at the soldiers who had raised their shields. The mud walls could not hold out any longer and broke into pieces before the frantic soldiers. All of them began to gather in torrents from various directions surrounding the defense line. The soldiers raised their weapons to counterattack, but hesitated for a moment upon seeing many of their comrades within the torrent. "We've already collected almost all of the gases and we're going to destroy it," a loud voice from the mage was heard signaling the progress. Christina took a deep breath and roared, "Forward!" Christina's voice, carried by the wind at high speed, reached the soldiers' ears, and they rushed forward again, trying to push the enemies back. Taking large strides, Christina's body glowed with an auspicious golden color, and her blonde hair began to shine with a glorious golden light. Taking a great leap, she launched herself forward and her body shot out like a cannon towards the mass of frenzied humans. Boom! The ground trembled with thunderous booms that shook the place, emitting large shockwaves that pushed the frenzied human back while launching him far away. 5-meter-wide craters formed, and as soon as the dust and debris dispersed, Christina's radiant figure emerged. After Alex cast a series of healing spells, the pain due to her injury greatly lessened. Although her soul had not been fully healed and her rank had not increased, it nevertheless allowed her to use a portion of her power. Raising his sword that erupted with a golden light as mana converged on it and covered the blade in a layer of aura, he took a step forward and slashed horizontally. A 10-meter-long vibrant and brilliant arc emerged from the sword that shot towards the enemy like a torrent of waves and swept them away. The beautiful brilliant arc flashed under the darkness of the night, and like a hot knife passing through butter, it easily pierced through the frenzied humans who reached it. As the golden arc passed through the frenzied humans who were rushing towards Christina, their bodies split into two halves. While their lower half was still galloping towards Christina due to the remaining momentum, the upper halves fell to the ground with a loud noise from which blood spurted out, dyeing the ground a reddish hue. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116. Christina steps onto the battlefield. The gasps of the soldiers, the screams of the wounded, and the shouts of the superiors accompanied by clashes and sounds of breaking metal that would normally send shivers down people's bones created a deadly symphony. But all voices ceased for a moment, only to erupt into loud cheers when Christina stepped onto the battlefield. The golden glow radiating from Christina made their blood boil with the excitement of seeing the lady who was once hailed as the goddess of war in action. All fears and worries transformed into loud cheers the moment she made her move. The bright arc of swordlight shot from Christina's sword cut through everything in front of it and struck the ground, forming a massive fissure as it crushed the enemies. It not only struck the enemies but also the hearts of the soldiers. It was like a torch fire in the darkness that ignited their blood and souls. Even though she was crippled and began her journey once again, they have seen their commanding general defeat a horde of master rankers like they were nobodies when she was just a peak-level disciple. And when she reached the rank of master, many rejoiced at her advancement, thinking that they had strong support on their side, that they could even take on the epic rank easily. But their dreams were shattered upon learning that Christina's rank dropped for some unknown reason, and it had been a while since they saw her fight at her full strength. Christina used her monstrous combat prowess to slash and cut a path in the torrent of frenzied humans. Slicing through golden wind blades with each swing of her sword, it was like an unparalleled sword piercing through the enemy's heart. Mordek and Frank followed her idea and began their killing game. They both charged forward and crashed into the enemies with a massive amount of force. The first disciples and squires died like chickens as the sharp edge of the blades, the weapon struck them, and the higher level ones were injured and blown to pieces. It seemed like nothing could stop the master rank trio. Christina, who was at the forefront, suddenly felt a fluctuation of mana and noticed the movement of mana churning within certain frenzied soldiers. Christina's eyes flashed coldly, and she took large strides as she advanced towards the source of the chaos. A frenzied peak disciple level man was about to make a breakthrough to the master rank. "Frank, lead the way," Christina shouted in an authoritative tone. Frank nodded and leaped forward with a loud stomp. The sword in his hand was enveloped with fiery energy, and he slashed his sword like a whip, and his sword moved like a shadow emitting a huge beam of flames. "Fire bazooka!" Frank shouted and stabbed his sword at the horde of frenzied soldiers blocking his way. A light flashed from her sword, followed by towering flames that shot out from the tip of the blade towards the group. Doo-doo-whoosh! The flames burst forth and devoured those caught in her bow and burned them away, leaving nothing behind but their ashes that were blown away and scattered by the wind. Seeing that the path was clear, Frank and Christina stopped on the surface, leaving a large crack that began to spread outwards with a loud crack. Her figure shot up into the sky like a bullet as she made a massive leap of 30 meters. Passing over the frantic soldiers, she arrived near the location where the one whose kingdom was rapidly advancing stood. She raised her sword and held it vertically, the tip of her sword pointing towards the sky as if she was signaling that she was going to pierce the sky with her sword. A large flash began to emerge from her sword, and a pillar of golden light extended into the sky. The surrounding mana began to condense, and a fierce breath emerged from Christina that created a coercion of power all around. The golden light pillar burst outwards and began to condense on her sword, and a huge golden sword manifested from it. The golden sword manifestation was 50 meters long, and a brilliant light emerged from it, illuminating the place. Christina's figure, who was floating in the air at this moment, began to fall because she lost the momentum generated by the jump. As her figure fell, she raised her sword and slashed it towards the frenzied soldier who had almost reached her master. Although the man's mind was clouded and he lost his senses, the fear that had been suppressed in his heart erupted as he saw the huge sword pass over his head. Clenching his fist, he struck a huge golden sword, but it was in vain. Even though his fist had tremendous power, he was not even able to move the sword from its place, which crashed towards him with thunderous booms. Boo! A massive golden pillar of light surged forward, illuminating the place. A powerful explosion occurred from vibrations on the surface that spread like shockwaves across the ground. Rumble! 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 A large crack that seemed to split the earth into two halves appeared on the ground. A massive crater appeared accompanied by a fissure that engulfed everyone within its radius. Fierce gales materialized and shot towards the frenzied soldiers like swords and cut them into pieces. Anyone within a 70-meter radius of the sword was struck, their bodies exploding into pieces as the massive golden sword razed everything. Rocks and ground particles were pulverized along with the humans, shattering them into countless tiny particles and erasing their entire existence. Even those from their own side who were affected by that cursed gas were brutally killed without anything left behind. Christiana landed on the ground after creating devastation around her and filling the air with muffled moans of pain and misery, but even after this there was no change of expression on her face, nor was there any remorse. She had to do what she had to do, and she wouldn't hesitate for a moment to paint the world with blood if necessary. Chapter 117, Battle on the Other Side. After Christina's strike, the outcome of the war had finally been settled, leaving everything in Alex's hands. As they cleared out those who remained, loud crashes continued to be heard on the other side, creating shockwaves, one after another. Boom, boom, boom. Shrill voices echoed throughout the place, breaking the silence of the night like the shrill clicking of insects. The silence of the night had long since been broken, and the total darkness of the night was slowly fading away as the world prepared to welcome the rays of the sun. Garza snorted and his body began to become covered in burning flames. With a long scythe in his hand, he teleported to Alex's front, trying to cut off his head. Alex looked at the approaching scythe covered in flames and twisted his body. Instead of retreating, he advanced towards the attack. As the scythe was about to touch his body, he suddenly moved to the side and slashed with his greatsword like a whip. The sword-shaped beam moved towards Heron's stomach, wanting to pierce it. Garza turned his hand and changed the direction of his strike, and raised the scythe to use it as a shield to protect himself. The tip of the greatsword stabbed into him and hit the edge of the scythe and forced him to take a few steps back. His hand was hit hard due to the great force of Alex's strike. Alex surprised him because he was able to parry his attacks, which had the strength of the epic rank, even though this guy was at the peak disciple rank. Alex gave him no leeway and swung his sword viciously towards Heron. The force carried by his sword created a large, sharp blade of wind that shot towards Heron, who was retreating. Seeing the wind blade, he turned his body at an unprecedented angle and dodged the blow, but because of this, he lost his balance in the air. Alex used an aerial jump, and his figure appeared near Heron, giving him a huge scare as he swung his scythe, aiming for Alex's neck. The scythe pierced through Alex and past his body, which later turned out to be an afterimage, and he turned his head to see a dark mass covering his vision and obscuring his sight. He didn't lose sight. Later a first beam appeared before his face and hit him hard, making him fly away. Boom. Heron's figure shot backwards like a cannon, and his body crashed into rocks and trees, which were crushed and dragged away by the impact. Heron screamed as his body glowed in flames and a fierce aura erupted from him. Damn it. Damn it. These moron dogs from the Suicide Squads have no chills. Alex cursed as he saw Heron burning his life force and creating strong flames, which annoyed him greatly. Once I win the war, I swear that I will fry that imbecile king along with the people responsible for spreading these techniques in hot oil. Can't these dogs fight normally? Alex cursed and even wanted to spit at this man. Alex could feel a powerful breath coming out of Heron, whose entire body was engulfed in flames, looking like a flaming demon. His entire body was literally on fire. I guess this man is even going to shit fire on me now, Alex said in an irritated tone. The ground Heron was standing on began to burn and radiated a sizzling and crackling sound. Large holes appeared on the surface as the ground began to burn. Silence. Heron exhaled deeply, spewing flames from his mouth and nostrils. Bush! With a fierce bang, his body disappeared and appeared behind Alex. Alex was startled by the man's sudden bursts of terrifying speed and had no time to turn his head as Heron had already swept his leg towards Alex. Alex could only rely on his instincts honed from countless battles and utilize the feeling from the training and sparring he had done so far. Before he could raise his greatsword, he felt a strong burning sensation in his arms and saw that Heron had shot a punch towards his arm from afar. Alex gritted his teeth to suppress the pain and let go of his heavy sword to prepare for Heron's incoming attack. He raised both of his arms and closed them in an X shape to block Heron's leg sweep. Bang! Alex felt both of his arms being struck by a steel hammer again and felt like they were almost breaking. Alex's entire body was blown away by the enormous force. A deep fiery imprint appeared on the armor covering his arms along with a small dent, and before he could fall to the ground, Heron caught up with him halfway and swung his arms and made Alex fly upwards. Heron appeared in the air again and punched Alex hard with both fists. Alex heard the faint sound of cracking from somewhere and his body shot towards the ground at high speed and crashed into the ground heavily like a meteor. In the area where he was hit, he could barely feel anything and he coughed as he tried to get up immediately. "It's taking me a long time to deal with you. King of Nevin, you surely seemed like a worthy opponent that could cause great danger to others in the future, but unfortunately, you will fall at my hands." Alex coughed violently as he tried to get up when he saw a bright and dazzling swordlight in the distance and his expression turned solemn. He activated his mana sensor and felt turbulent mana circulating on top. He frowned as he looked in the direction of the battle. His gaze seemed to be piercing through the darkness, detecting what was happening there. "Host, please stop being a masochist. Stop acting and finish the job. Didn't they teach you in kindergarten that it's dangerous to play with fire? Heron is a ticking time bomb. So please finish him off quickly." Chapter 118, Forcing a Breakthrough. Alex listened to the robotic voice inside his head and stood up from the crater and shook the dust off his armor that was stained with dirt. "I just wanted to experience how it feels to be overpowered and outclassed. After all, it's not a strict rule that I'll always get a crushing victory. Besides, I wanted to fight properly, using techniques instead of using strength moves," Alex said with an amused smile. "Host, I don't know what goes through your head every day, but take it seriously, otherwise you're going to get killed for real. This battle is too difficult for you at present and your carelessness is going to cost you dearly. Stop harping. I want to try something out and see if it's worth the risk. I guess it all ends here," Alex said with a deep sigh. The moment Alex finished his words, Heron had already appeared before Alex and moved forward with strong momentum. A punch that whistled through the air with tremendous momentum struck Alex's chest. Strangely, although Alex was hit by Heron's strong force, he didn't go flying but simply staggered back a few steps. Heron's eyes widened in horror as he felt a terrifying and gloomy sensation tingling on his back. Heron's senses sharpened and raising his hands, he twirled his finger followed by his fiery energy which began to condense around Alex. As Alex was pushed back a few steps, flames surrounded him from all sides and engulfed him in a horrifying temperature. The surrounding temperature increased greatly and everything around Alex began to burn while emitting black smoke. The entire area was lit up in a yellowish-orange glow with black smoke covering the middle, and Alex's sight was completely covered in darkness. The fire surrounded and engulfed him from within. He could hear the sizzling sound of his skin and armor burning in fire. However, the physical pain was second as his willpower to resist made his soul tremble. Alex didn't cast a healing spell but instead let the flames engulf him and took the blow head-on, and the armor began to glow emitting a faint reddish color. Sweat dripped from Alex's body and was instantly vaporized by the heated armor. Despite having great tenacity and persistence, the intense pain coming from the scorching flames began to become unbearable, and Alex felt his consciousness becoming blurry. He could hear the sound of the system screaming in his head and cursing him for what he was doing. Alex bit his teeth as he muttered to himself, "I have to endure the pain. If I miss this chance, I'm sure it will take me a while." Garza, who was staring at Alex, suddenly sensed danger and had a bad feeling about it. His instinct was telling him to end things quickly, otherwise something bad might happen. Alex, who was on his knees, suddenly stood up and his breathing seemed to stop for a moment as a white light faintly grew from his body, enveloping him and starting to form a cocoon. Heron's eyeball twitched and he was frightened as he saw a white light coming out of Alex's body that started to glow brighter. Heron raised his scythe and wrapped it in fiery energies that wove into his sword. Channeling strength into his legs, he propelled his body forward with a strong stomp and leapt towards Alex with terrifying momentum and slashed at Alex with a fire scythe. The ground cracked as he took a step forward, and a deep imprint of his foot was left behind that burned the top layer of the ground. The fire from his scythe gushed forth like a torrent, and a column of flames erupted from his body. The burst of energies suddenly stopped, and the red flames began to recede and energies as hot as magma began to condense at the tip of his scythe and attack Alex with great momentum. But before the tips of the blades could touch the white light emitted by the cocoon, it broke at one point and a hand emerged from it and grabbed the tip of the scythe with its bare hand. Boom! A small explosion occurred and the flames that had condensed on the blades exploded outwards, illuminating the entire area. The small sphere of flames began to enlarge and burst radially, burning everything in its path. Just in time, the entire area detonated with a terrifying noise and a deep crater appeared on the ground, covering a huge area. The crater glowed with a reddish tint because the rocks and soil had become too hot to turn into lava. But what was shocking to Heron was that the power of the flame had been completely nullified and had disappeared. Heron looked at the hand holding the tip of the scythe. A reddish layer of aura covered the knuckles while the gauntlet and shoulder blades of the arm had been broken and blown away by the impact, while the body was still shining fiercely. The white light suddenly dispersed and a crimson glow took its place. The crimson rays erupting from the body did not disappear but instead continued to expand. It continued for nearly 10 meters in length as it completely enveloped Alex's body in a crimson hue. The crimson glow began to expand, carrying a terrifying breath, and with a glow as the center, the surrounding ground shattered as the soil and rocks were devastated as if it was an explosion caused by a falling meteorite. Heron almost thought he was hallucinating as he felt the powerful pressure bearing down on him from the opponent. The intense and crazily bright light gradually converged towards the body as its center. The glow on Alex's body finally subsided, leaving a reddish glint in his eyes as he appeared from the cocoon, which burst into countless reddish light particles and scattered into the air. Alex appeared from the glow with a large smile on his face as he looked at Heron's surprised expression. Seeing his grumpy expression, he couldn't help but mock this man a little. "Heron, my friend, thank you for this wonderful gift," Alex murmured as he extended his hand outward as if to give his dear friend a gentle hug for helping him. Alex's sneer woke Heron from his slight stupor and he re-evaluated Alex. "This is truly amazing." Heron hesitated for a moment, then his deep, heavy voice echoed again. "You have reached the rank of master at the last moment of a deadly crisis. This proves once again that your existence will pose a threat to Amidon. I must eliminate you today no matter the cost. Otherwise, this little weed may one day grow into a great tree." PFTT, Heron. "You are a funny man. You sure know how to joke," Alex said as he laughed loudly. "Deadly crisis. I don't remember ever being in such a situation," Alex smirked. Without waiting for Alex to finish his speech, Heron appeared before Alex and a powerful force was launched towards Alex's face. Alex saw the punch coming towards him and could feel the difference compared to the moment before. Even with the stat points he gained from the system and combined with his dexterity, he was still a bit lower than Heron. After all, there was a huge gap in realm between them. Furthermore, with his pseudo-epic rank strengths coupled with earning his life force to gain great strength, Heron can even outlast peak epic rank warriors and give them an incredible battle. Heron's strength was enough to pressure Alex into making a forced advance. Alex moved to the side and distanced himself several meters and dodged the punch. Heron missed his attack, but his figure quickly disappeared and appeared behind Alex's back to attack again before Alex could stabilize himself, trying to surprise him with his speed. Alex twisted his body and leaned his body to the left to dodge the blow as he threw his elbow towards Heron and struck his stomach with great force, sending Heron flying a few meters as the scythe in his hand fell down. Bang! Garza twisted his body in the air and clenched his fist tightly. The fiery energy in Heron's body converged into his fist and he threw a fist at Alex, who countered it by throwing his own fist at him. Boom! The ground shattered and a shockwave was produced that erupted radially, sweeping away dust and debris. Garza was about to attack again, but before he could stabilize himself, he received a kick to his lower ribs that caused his body to shake for a while. Garza punched Alex with astonishing speed and Alex's figure that suddenly appeared before Heron flickered and disappeared. Heron's jaw was hit by a wide uppercut and his figure was sent flying into the sky. Alex teleported and appeared above Heron and interlaced his fingers together. He formed a double fist and punched Heron's chest. Crack. Chapter 119, I Don't Trust You. Heron was horrified at the sudden onslaught of blows coming from all sides. This guy had just broken through and didn't even take a moment to stabilize his realm and started going all out. Alex threw Heron around and just as he was a little distracted, he received a heavy blow. His face received a hard hit and he flew up and was shocked to find Alex floating in the air as he looked at him with a big smile on his face waiting for him. Heron moved his arms and legs trying to change direction, but he couldn't do anything. His chest received a hard hit and he collapsed to the ground with a loud rumble. He felt a sharp pain in his back and his chest seemed to have received a dent that prevented him from breathing for a moment. Heron remembered that the combo was similar to the one he used against Alex, but he hadn't thought that they would attack him in any way. Plus, Alex's speed advantage was becoming more obvious and Alex was playing along with him. His scythe had already been blown away by the game and as he stood up, he stumbled in his steps and as he tried to steady himself, he felt a soft tap on his shoulder. Heron screamed in horror and flinched back as he saw Alex's face very close to him. "Let me give you a tour," Alex muttered and, grabbing him by the shoulder, leapt into the air and threw him up into the night sky. Arg! The heart-rending scream echoed through the sky as Heron's body was thrown like a ball into the sky and, making a projectile motion, his body descended to the ground. Alex raised his hand making a sign and mana swirled around his hand and his greatsword that was lying somewhere floated into the air and shot towards his hand. With a rank of master, he can use spiritual magic with which he can control mana weakly, which only a high-level mage could do. The sword flew and landed in his hand. Alex held the hilt of the sword and raised his greatsword vertically and pointed towards Heron. "Goodbye, Heron," Alex muttered as he took a step forward. The ground cracked and a large deep footprint appeared on it, and Alex's body that was present there suddenly disappeared like a shadow, causing the air around him to ripple, sending out weak gales radially. Alex's body moved like lightning, and Heron, who was falling to the ground, felt a strong pressure descend upon him, and before he could know what was happening, a shadow passed by him with a speed invisible to his naked eye. He simply felt a gust of wind brush past his cheek, swaying the air and causing his screams to sound louder. With a loud thud, his body fell to the ground. The loud thud was accompanied by a slight crack. The screams that were erupting suddenly ceased, and he lay motionless on the ground with his eyes wide open. After a brief pause, his body separated into two pieces. The man's bright red internal organs, his limbs covering his white bones, burst and crumbled, and a fountain of blood gushed out from his body, which fell to the ground like drizzle. The blood in the air containing the man's leftover flame energy turned into a cloud of bloodstream, and more blood spilled onto the ground and began to melt it, dyeing the entire place red and giving off a horrible stench. Spike. Alex put down the greatsword on the ground and breathed in relief. "Host, have you gone mad? Why did you need to force a breakthrough when you're taking it easy? You'll obtain your full powers in the end, so why did you do something foolish?" Alex listened to the system rant for a moment and said, "It's because I don't believe in you." "Huh? What?" For a moment the system was speechless upon hearing Alex's words and asked, "What did he mean?" "I didn't mean that I doubt your words, rather I doubt fate. In the goddess's shrine, I trained and achieved unfathomable strength, but then it can't be transferred to my body directly, so the goddess used her divinity to create you as a medium and stored my energy in you and transferred it to me." "Right, host, you're right about that, but so what? Also, although goddesses are all-powerful and omnipotent, they are not omnipotent nor perfect, nor can they be said to be the strongest existence. The will of the world still reigns supreme, and there are also many gods and goddesses besides them, although the 5 who trained me are the main goddess and the strongest of the group. Still, gods are gods. If a mini-go is not a small powerhouse, if I meet an incarnation of another god in the future and by chance, that god has the power to see through the system and might be able to stop you from giving me the power in the form of stats, or might even snatch away my divinity then." Alex spoke with a solemn expression as he looked at the system screen. "Host, your worry is unnecessary. No other god can see through the system you have. Furthermore, snatching away your divinity. You make it sound like this is child's play. Believe me, host, no one is going to deny you anything." Alex sighed deeply and looked at the system with a gloomy expression. "System, do you know exactly what you sound like right now? You sound like a scammer." "Host, what do you mean by that?" "Nothing, I'm just taking precautions for the future. Because who knows, one day the will of the world will manifest before me and start accusing me of breaking the law." Alex spoke with an amused expression. "Okay, now let's drop this topic for now. We need to finish the work on the other side." Chapter 120, Time is Precious. Alex, after finishing his work, arrived at the place where the main forces of both sides were fighting. Alex arrived at a bloodied battlefield and watched it for a moment. Arg! A couple of frantic men who were standing at the back started running back with terrified expressions. Their minds couldn't take it anymore and they broke down as if they had lost their souls. They screamed and tried to escape. Alex's eyebrows furrowed as he saw the scene. "Wait. This person is unaffected and is just pretending. This asshole," Alex shouted, and his figure appeared before the men. They seemed to be Amedan's generals and held higher positions compared to the peasants. Explosion! Explosion! The men who were trying to escape the battlefield took advantage of the chaos to escape, but before they could leave, they suddenly felt a loud bang and their bodies flew through the air and crashed onto the ground. The bones in their bodies were crushed and they were screaming at the top of their lungs. They looked ahead to see the man who seemed to be the harbinger of death, and his appearance meant one thing: their commander had been killed. Their pupils contracted and their entire body trembled in fear at the thought of that man brutally killing the commander. Most of them lost their senses at the sight, while those who could still retain the last shred of sanity began to crawl away trying to escape. But behind them was an equally horrifying scene where Wright's soldiers slaughtered the frenzied man without any shred of mercy. Alex appeared next to one of the men, placed his hand on his head and muttered, "Let's see what we have here." Extraction. Alex chanted the spell, and a small magic circle appeared above the man's head, who disappeared in an instant. What Alex was doing was similar to a soul search, where he could extract fragments of memories from the person, but the person whose spell was cast on could suffer catastrophic damage. The veins on the main head bulged, and a red light flashed from his pupil, and small flashes of crimson light seemed to emerge from his head. Stop!" the man roared at the top of his lungs in pain, and his miserable screams echoed everywhere. Alex turned a deaf ear to the man's scream, and focused on the fragments of memories flashing past his retina. He saw a young boy, embarking on a journey to become a general and then on to some useless things, killing, fighting and training. Most of them were useless, but in the end he saw something that shocked me. This was the last conversation he had with a commander. Amidon is preparing a special team consisting of the elite with the help of others. Take this antidote and drink it, and if the situation worsens, press this button. Sir, what is this? The man asked with a surprised expression. The armor the soldiers wear is made with great effort. Once you press the button, a special gas will be emitted from the armor that will make you stronger for a short period. Sir, then what is this antidote? He asked curiously. It's just a preventative measure. Although that gas will increase your strength once its effects have worn off, you won't be able to fight for a few days. Now go and give this to another general. Thank you, sir, for entrusting me with this precious thing. The general saluted the commander and walked out of the tent, leaving the commander looking at him with a big smile. So the commander made him a scapegoat? Alex muttered and pulled his hand back, leaving the man to fall to the ground like a soulless being. His body shuddered and shook violently a few times, and saliva dripped from his lips, and his eyes became dull, and his brain seemed to be short-circuiting. Alex walked over to the other man, who was watching the scene in disbelief. He was so horrified after witnessing the scene that he wanted to scream, but no voices would come out of his throat. Tears ran down his cheeks, and he begged Alex to forgive him by joining their hands together, but Alex ignored his plea and placed his hand on his head, drawing out his memories. But this man's memories were completely useless compared to the other man's. Alex pulled back his hand, smashed the man's head, and killed him without any remorse, and walked towards his army. Roars of rage and bloodlust, screams of pain and wailing could be heard everywhere. The blood from the piled corpses penetrated deep into the surface of the ground, painting it red. Next to Christina appeared Alex, who, after finishing everything, was receiving the reports of the war's losses. Christina looked at Alex and asked, "Is everyone okay?" "Yes, look at me. I don't even have a bruise on my body," Alex said with a satisfied smile. "It would be strange if you were injured even after receiving a healing spell," Christina replied. "By the way, did you kill the commander or did you leave him to gain some information?" "I have to kill him. He was burning his life essence. It would be more harmful to keep him alive. It was a pity I couldn't use extraction on the man. After all, who knows, that man might explode like a bomb. Still, I have some information from those peasants." Christina's eyes widened for a moment upon hearing Alex's words, and she curiously asked what information he had obtained from the enemy. "I have a lead on the antidote for this toxic gas, and I'm thinking of going to the enemy camp to look for it. I'll accompany you," Christina said. Alex nodded and walked over to Christina, wrapped his arms around her waist and lifted her up in a princess position. "Alex, what are you doing?" Christina asked with a surprised expression. "I also know the flight spell. I can take you with me and I'll save some time as well." Alex gave a cheeky smile. Mordek and Max, who witnessed the scene, gave a thumbs up at Alex's tactical move. "Yeah, you're right. That would save some time. Time is too precious to waste on war. Alright, let's go," Christina said with a stoic expression that broke Alex's heart. Alex's expression hardened as he saw Christina's reaction. He thought Christina would blush and her face would turn red, but there was nothing on her face. No blush, no blush. Alex could feel that Christina's heartbeat had quickened and there was a reddish tint to her ears, but the expression she was showing was one of indifference and disinterest. She's too dumb to understand what's going on or what it feels like to carry someone, or is it the complete opposite and she's showing indifferent expressions because she knows what's going on? Alex muttered to himself as he looked at her. Finally, Alex sighed as he saw that his trick failed to surprise Christina. "Alex, stop wasting time and let's move," Christina said and snapped Alex out of his thoughts. "Yeah, At least I was able to touch her, Alex muttered to himself as his figure floated into the air and the duo flew towards the enemy camp. Chapter 121, Dance Christina. Alex, holding Christina in her arms, floated in the air as she looked down at the scenery from above. Far away from the horizon, where the blue sky and green plains met, numerous elongated flag-like structures fluttered. The flags were blue and fluttered under the gentle breeze of the sun. There were many tents along with temporary walls made of wood. Alex looked at the black stain on the leftmost corner that could be caused by Mordek when he burned the rations. Alex felt that there were a lot of people hiding in the tent. There are still many alive, Christina muttered as she looked down. They could be workers and slaves that Amidan's soldiers brought with them, Alex said as she slowly descended. We shouldn't kill them unnecessarily, they are mere servants. We shouldn't kill them just because they came with the enemy, Alex suggested. Still, we should be careful, Christina said and jumped down as Alex neared the ground. Although she didn't see it on her face, she felt quite embarrassed. After all, she was the commander-in-chief of not only George Fortress but the entire Nevin, and being taken away like this when countless eyes were staring at her was quite embarrassing for her, but it was still better to save time by going to Alex and finishing things quickly instead of acting tough. Christina, you search around there. I'll take a look at the commander's tent, Alex muttered as she looked at the huge black tent that had a large flagpole in front of it. Alex sensed that there were people inside. There were approximately 6 people inside. Alex raised her guard and stood before the door of the tent. It was just a cotton screen in the name of the door, and as soon as Alex opened the screen, her face became hot as a tomato. Inside were not 6 people, but 6 beautiful mature ladies. All of them had only a piece of cloth wrapped around their chest, leaving their plump bust and cleavage exposed along with a small set of clothes around their waist. The women inside were smoking and stood with shocked expressions upon seeing someone other than the commander enter. Alex closed his eyes subconsciously but opened one eye to take a look and shook his head to get rid of the dirty thoughts. Alex closed the screen, turned his back to the door, and was shocked to see Christina standing in front of him and staring at him menacingly. Why are you just standing here instead of coming in? Christina asked as she looked at Alex's flushed face. Nothing, Alex tried to speak but Christina pushed him away and walked in. Stop wasting time. We need to finish. Christina stopped in the middle of her sentence and was left speechless upon seeing the partially naked women. Alex coughed a little and spoke. Girl, can you dress up a little? You see, I'm a real gentleman. What are women like you doing here? And why are you all exposing yourselves with less clothing? Christina asked with a curious expression. Alex listened to Christina's words and wanted to find a wall to hit his head against. My goodness. How can someone be so stupid? Did he spend a lot of his time on the battlefield? Then how can he be so ignorant? It was pretty easy to tell what was going on, Alex muttered to himself. Cough. Cough. Christina, I think these ladies were just having fun and macing around with the commander. Fun. How? Christina asked, raising her eyebrows. How were they having fun with the commander? Seeing Christina's genuine expression of curiosity, Alex couldn't bear it any longer and spoke with a soft tone. You know what people do when they have cute, tender, mature babies? I mean, they kiss each other, Alex said with a nervous expression as she twirled her finger. She swore in her heart to file a petition against the goddess of war and ask her how could Christina be so foolish. Christina tilted her head from left to right as if trying to decipher Alex's words, but as she pondered for a moment, her eyes widened and her gaze exchanged between Alex and the ladies, and she stepped back with a cry. She stepped back with a shocked expression. Lifting her trembling finger, she pointed at the ladies and asked, So, you are all wives of your commander? Christina asked as she wondered how to treat them since they had murdered their husbands. After all, they just killed the commander, and since they are all his wives, will they be able to keep calm even if they are saved? But the women shook their heads and gave her another surprise. You are not his wife, so why are you having children with him? Alex's body shook and she almost fell on her back upon hearing Christina's words. Furthermore, the genuine look of surprise on Christina's face made Alex want to bury herself. Does this girl even know that brothels exist or what that means? Or does she know the meaning of the word prostitution? Christina, whose personal legion consisted mostly of girls, and even after arriving at Right, most of the soldiers under her command were well behaved and did not engage in these kinds of activities, so she was oblivious to this kind of thing. Furthermore, she knew nothing about what was called a brothel, where all kinds of things were carried out. Although she knew the general procedures and steps, she still couldn't imagine that they would do something like that to someone who is not even her husband. Christina, calm down a bit. I understand, you're not familiar with general knowledge. But don't worry, we'll work on your weaknesses bit by bit and provide you with general knowledge. Well, let me handle matters from this point on, Alex said and stepped forward towards the girls who had quickly wrapped themselves around the clothes that were lying there hastily. Listen, little girl. Before Alex could finish his sentence, all the girls jumped on him and cried out sadly. Please forgive us, in exchange for our lives, we can warm your bed for the whole day. Chapter 122, In Search of the Antidote. The girls surrounded Alex and cried sadly. Sir, please don't kill us. We will serve you until the end of our lives. Woo-oo. Alex was held by the 6 girls on all fronts and their soft skin rubbed against his armor. Alex felt like his eardrum would burst if that lady kept crying. Calm down. Aren't we going to kill you? Alex spoke and assured the girls. Sir, if you forgive us, we swear that we will follow you and serve you until our last breath. We will also warm your bed every day and take you to 9 heavens. One lady spoke and leaned on Alex's chest while the other leaned down holding his arms and legs. Girls, calm down, Alex said with his back soaked in sweat. He could feel a murderous vibe coming from behind that terrified him like never before. Christina looked at the scene and found it absolutely disgusting. After learning what was going on, she couldn't help but look in disgust at these women who were selling their bodies. Somehow, seeing these women clinging to Alex made her even angrier. If it weren't for Alex, she would teach them a good lesson. Plus, she wanted to see Alex's reaction. Alex, who was in the middle of a hurricane, felt his senses dull and found himself standing between 2 doors of death. One of the women reached out her hand and wrapped it around Alex's neck and tried to pull his face closer. Christina's eyes flashed with anger as she saw the audacity in this girl and thought about taking a step forward, however before she took a step. Bang! Fool! As the woman wrapped her hand around Alex's neck and was about to pull him closer, Alex's hand whipped out and struck the woman's face with great force. The punch shattered her face and blood sprayed all over her body and her face simply disappeared completely, leaving her body along with her neck behind. The lady's corpse falls to the ground with a loud thud. Blood gushed out like a fountain from her neck and sprayed onto Alex's face, painting her face red. The other women who were around Alex trying to get closer screamed in horror and jumped back at the sight of Alex's cruelty. They fell on their backs as they stared at Alex's bloody face, sending a chill down their spines. Even Christina was shocked by Alex's abrupt punch. She couldn't understand what happened and why Alex suddenly killed her so fiercely. After all, he was the one who suggested Christina not to kill unnecessarily. Alex wiped the blood off her face and walked towards one of the women, who flinched at the sight of her gaze. She tried to get up but Alex's silhouette flickered, followed by a faint sound of bones breaking. Alex appeared directly before the woman and pressed her legs onto his knee, and with a loud stomp, he broke her bones. Arg! The woman screamed due to the sudden burst of pain, and tears welled up in her eyes like a broken dam. Girls, I think you're all misunderstanding something. I am a gentleman, not a man who thinks with his lower half. Did you think that you could fool me with your sweet and innocent act and dig your nails into my skin that contained poison? Alex spoke while clicking her tongue, as she couldn't even imagine how many might have already fallen victim to her schemes and how many more would fall if she didn't kill them. These girls may look like cheap whores, but they are actually all specially trained poison girls. Since they didn't awaken mana, one could let their guard down around them, and then these girls would seduce the fools, and while doing the dirty deeds, they would kill them with poison on their nails. The other women were horrified to see that the man knew all about the maneuvers. Christina, kill them, Alex ordered in a gruff tone. The woman cried and started begging Alex for mercy and even fell to her knees. Girls, you have your chance, but you didn't accept my kindness. Since you are unable to bear my kindness, you will have to bear my wrath, Alex said and pulled out her sword. Christina was already moving behind the women, and with one swift blow, she cut off all of their heads. Alex turned around, ignoring the bloody corpse, and began searching for the antidote. According to the memory, beneath the commander's bed was a small chamber. Alex walked over to it, lifted the mattress and took out the 2 wooden planks. Inside was a highly decorated box. The antidote is inside, Christina asked, raising her eyebrows. Let's open it. Alex tried to open it but saw that there was a magic rune engraved on it. Alex opened her fist and placed it on her chest and muttered the spell. A magic circle appeared and passed through the box. Click! Click! The rune engraved on the box broke, and Alex opened it to see a vial test tube containing a golden liquid. Alex looked at the antidote with a sad expression and held it tightly. If he had done this earlier, he might have been able to save the lives of many poor people who were sacrificed for the greed of the upper-class people. Alex was able to somehow determine that Bride and Amidon were working together, but he didn't know the extent of their partnership. Furthermore, he might be able to get a clue from these prostitutes if he did a soul search, but doing so many times a day would damage his brain, as soul searching has a great impact on the body. After all, soul searching can be said to be a type of forbidden spell that shouldn't be used carelessly. I have the antidote. Alex turned to look at Christina. Are you sure it's the antidote? What if it's something else that man left behind to trick us? Christina asked as she looked at the golden liquid. What if this liquid is a poison similar to that toxic gas, and a more potent one on top of that? We'll find out later. By the way, what do you want to do with these camps? Alex asked Christina. Let's take everything we find useful and burn what's left, Christina suggested. Then let's take the spoils of war if there's any, Alex muttered, and they both began searching for anything they could find useful. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, Throw the Trash into the Trash Can. Somewhere in Amidon, atop the rock, was a figure sitting with his eyes closed. He had grayish-white hair and a cold, ruthless gaze that chilled anyone who looked in his direction. His upper body was bare and a fierce breath emerged from his body. The veins on his muscles bulged outwards, while his muscles seemed to bulge to such an extent that they made him look like a monster. A warm breath exhaled from his lips, and his body glowed with a grayish hue that illuminated the entire place. For an unknown amount of time, the figure remained seated without moving a single muscle on his body. Sitting on a brightly colored rock, he looked like a sage, a man who had attained enlightenment. Twitch. With a small twitch, his eyes blinked and he suddenly opened them. The glow radiating from his body began to radially expand outwards, and a huge pillar of light emerged from his body. Dust debris flew everywhere due to the sudden burst of violent energy from his body and swept away everything in the periphery. The dust clouds began to disperse after a while, leaving the man who was sitting on the rock with an apathetic and cold look on his face. As soon as he opened his eyes, the air around him froze due to his intense gaze. He raised his hand, clenched his fist, and a small shockwave appeared, sending the air around his fist far away. The bulging muscles on his body began to return to their previous state, changing his inhuman appearance into something more human. Taking a look at the place that had been left in ruins, he stood up from his spot. It was then that his lips slightly raised as he slowly opened his mouth. I have finally made a breakthrough. With this, all the thorns in my path will be crushed. It is time for the beginning of my reign. With this, his figure shifted slightly forward, and like a flash, his figure disappeared. In the capital of Amidon, the news of the overwhelming defeat in the Battle of George had reached the capital. The entire capital was in a state of shock and unrest upon hearing the news. Not a single man from the forces that were sent towards George Fortress were able to survive, even though they were supervised by Heron, who was a pseudo-epic rank expert. But what was more infuriating was that they were unable to protect the flare, the borrowing of which cost tons of money. Meanwhile, in the castle's underground chamber, a secret meeting was being held, where confidential members were gathered. At a round table, 3 men were sitting while having a heated conversation. What do we do now? A green-haired man asked in an irritated voice. How have we lost the battle when we have invested so much manpower in one place? Calm down, Count Yun. Don't forget who our opponent in George was. We can only accept our incompetence and find a way to quickly resolve this, another white-haired man said. Calm down. You want me to calm down? For heaven's sake, do you even know what's going on? Duke less, Count Yun shouted fiercely and slammed his fist on the table. Can you just say that to the king so calmly? He'll cut us into pieces and throw us to the dogs when he hears the news of failure, and to make matters worse, the bastard lost a flare. The flare that the king warned us not to use until the last resort, but because of you 2 idiots who wanted to please the king and win the war as fast as lightning, you were allowed to use the flare even after I disagreed. Duke Les frowned upon hearing Count Yun's words, and his usually calm face lost its color. Losing the flare was a huge problem that, at worst, could cost them their lives. After all, They were the ones who had overseen the war in the king's absence and had allowed them to use the flare. What can we do now? I accept that this was my fault for trusting too much in that moron who with a pseudo-epic rank couldn't win the ant-filled fortress. Now we can only put our hope in you, Duke Les said and looked at the third man sitting on the other side, who was looking at him and Yun with an amused expression. Kekokekokek, the man laughed wildly with an evil smile and muttered, I knew something like this would happen. So I prepared some playing cards in advance. Prime Minister, please save us this time. We will give you a large sum for this favor, Duke Les and Count Yun spoke at the same time. Don't worry, trust me. The Prime Minister raised his hand and the shadow of a man appeared beside him. Are the subjects ready? He asked. The man nodded and said, everything is ready, awaiting your order, sir. Good. Another shadow flickered and a man carrying a scroll appeared and began to read it upon gaining approval. Jojo. The king has returned, the Prime Minister said with a smile that sent a shiver down one of them's spine while Duke Les and Count Yun froze in fear. A grayish-white figure walked on the reddish carpet with gold embroidery. A majestic aura radiated from him causing everyone to stare at him in awe. As he walked inside the dark hall where there were many people, they were stunned for a moment as they saw the aura materializing from the man that gave them a sense of menace. The sound of heavy breathing could be heard all around, but the increased breathing was neither due to exhaustion nor fear. Many emotions appeared on the faces of the people present there. Respect, admiration, reverence, jealousy, fear, and anguish. Step. 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 The footsteps of the grayish-white-haired man echoed throughout the hall. It was the only sound that the people present there could hear. Everything else except the sound of the man's footsteps seemed to disappear. The man walked up a flight of stairs at the end of the hall where there was a gigantic, dark black throne. As he sat down, he released the aura that he had been holding back. A bone-chilling coldness pervaded the entire hall and sweat ran down their faces as they felt the terrifying, suffocating aura. The aura emanating from the king was incomparable to the previous state, which means one thing. All the men present knelt down and shouted in unison for the man who is the king of Amadan. Your Majesty, we congratulate you on the advancement. Long live your highness. Loud cheers erupted from the people present in the hall that filled the entire throne room. Leaning on the soft cushion of the throne, he spoke slowly. Tell me, how is the situation? As soon as his voice fell, all the noise and loud applause that was echoing in the hall suddenly stopped and the people present bowed their heads in fear. They even prayed that the king would not call them by name. King Amadan rolled his eyes and looked at all the people, pointed his finger at one of the men and said, You, report everything to me. The man the finger was pointing at was trembling in fear, but as he had been ordered, he had to do his part. Your Highness, at that time our soldiers had surrounded Amadan from all 5 fronts. Of the 5 fronts, the war on one has already ended. King Amadan raised his eyebrows and asked, what was the result? The man gulped in fear, and mustering all his courage, he said, what? We have lost. Our soldiers who had been sent to George Fortress have been annihilated. The man spoke weakly as he lowered his head and tried to look away from the king's fearsome gaze. The king closed his eyes for a moment and seemed to sink into a deep gorge. Trash, a loud voice filled the entire room, and he simply shook his hand a little with a small gesture. The man who reported the news suddenly felt a strong force hitting him and his figure flew backwards in the air spewing blood and fell to the ground like a lifeless object. Gulp. Everyone gulped due to anxiety and fear as they might be the next target of the king's assault. Throw this trash into the trash dumpster, the king ordered. Following his order, images of 2 silhouettes flashed and holding the unconscious man disappeared from the sight as quickly as they appeared. You, inform me of other things, the king said pointing at another man. After hearing about the recent situation, he rubbed his forehead and spoke. I see an ant is trying to get in my way. Chapter 124, Am I a good leader? Everyone was nervously waiting for the king's order and staring at him with solemn expressions. Although they had already lost one of the most important battles, there was no sense of panic or anger in the king's expression that frightened them anymore. It also made them feel uneasy as they thought of who would be responsible for this and caused them to lose their composure. Let's put this matter aside. Tell me, whose plan was it? Which fool allowed the flare to be used on the battlefield? I remember giving a strict warning not to use the flare without my permission. So, which fool dares to do this? The king spoke as he released his intense killing intent, locking everyone in the throne room. As soon as his heavy and rough voice sounded, the people in the room trembled in fear of dying pointlessly. Everyone turned their heads towards the person at the side. The king noticed their gaze and turned his head to fix it on that person. Duke Les, was it you? Duke Les's entire existence shook when his gaze met the king's. Your Majesty, please forgive this ignorant man's recklessness, Duke Les cried out as he fell to his knees and began to bang his head against the ground. Your Majesty, please don't kill me. I accept that it was my mistake, but how could I imagine that the pseudo-epic rank commander couldn't even win a war so easily? Silence. A loud and savage voice erupted from the king, who had strengthened and amplified his mana and nearly ruptured everyone's eardrums. Duke Les nearly vomited blood when he suffered the impact of the king's attack. Did you do it alone, or was there someone else with you? I remember handing the matter over to you and Yun. Count Yun, why don't you show yourself? Count Yun, who was hiding behind one of the men's back, suddenly jumped up in fright and lay down on the ground to beg for forgiveness. The king looked at the funny scene and put his hand to his face. Pointing with his hands, he shouted, an idiot here, an idiot there, a fool there. Why am I so unlucky? Why am I surrounded by idiots everywhere? Now tell me, Duke Les and Count Yun, what gifts would you like to receive for your idiotic actions? Duke Les and Count Yun felt as if their souls were going to leave their bodies and run away. They prayed in their hearts for this man to act. After all, he was the only one the king trusted the most. By winning George's war, they only delayed the inevitable. The king's attention was drawn to those words. A man stepped out from the crowd and spoke with a satisfied expression. The king rolled his eyes at the man who was the prime minister of the state. Lamar, what suggestion do you have? Lamar rubbed his mustache with a proud expression and suggested, let's deploy the special forces, we'll destroy right from within. Let's just remove the main chess piece, the queen, Lamar said and laughed with a sinister expression. The king raised his eyebrows and thought for a moment while weighing pros and cons at the same time. Excellent. After pondering for a moment, his lips curved upwards with a sinister expression that frightened the onlooker. Catalina is in the Crever Plain and is currently commanding her forces against us. Order them to retreat and accept defeat. Retreat from the other two fronts as well and push through the remaining fronts. Lamar, I give you the order. Deploy the special forces, and this time, I don't want any failures. If this operation fails, I will hang you on the gallows. The king looked at Lamar with a menacing expression. Lamar did not cower, but instead tilted his head with an amused smile. Don't worry, Your Majesty. In the face of the might of our forces, they would be slaughtered like pigs. That is what I expected, after spending countless resources on them. If they were unable to do even a simple thing like this, they should just die. The king spoke with an indifferent expression. Lamar, you will receive your reward if this mission turns out to be successful. I wish everyone had a brain like yours, but unlike you, these people's brains are full of shit. Now tell me, Lamar, what do I do with these two idiots? Your Majesty, take a portion of their wealth and let them regret it for a few days. Although they were foolish, they still thought of your highness's wishes. They just wanted to end it all quickly, but who knew that it would be our forces that would end it quickly? I forgive you both for now. Do as Lamar says and leave, the king shouted. Duke Les and Count Yun, who were lying on the ground, bowed their heads, stood up, and hurriedly retreated in fear. All right, that's all for now. It's time to begin the operation, the king said, giving a cruel and devilish smile. At George's fortress. It was already afternoon and the sun was at its peak, shedding bright rays, but the atmosphere around the place was anything but bright. There were craters everywhere, the walls had huge cracks and most of the ground had been burned, trees had been uprooted and blood had seeped into the ground, making the whole place reek of blood. Corpses were piled on top of each other, giving off a nauseating smell. There was a great deal of movement before George's fortress. Since the war had ended, it was time to clean up the battlefield and pay tribute to the fallen comrades by wishing them a good life in the afterlife. The corpses were divided into two halves. On one side were the corpses of Amidon's soldiers, while on the other were the corpses of Wright's and Nevin's soldiers. Alex decided to burn the corpses of Amidon's forces along with those infected with the plague on his side. The corpses were piled up one after another, making the whole place look like a graveyard. With a sword stuck in the ground, Alex stood near the entrance gates as he looked at the gruesome scene. Alex could see the corpses of between 4,000 to 4,500 soldiers. Anyone who saw Alex could see mixed feelings of anguish, suffering, fear, and pain on his face. Under the gentle breeze, his cape fluttered as if greeting the souls of the dead soldiers. Knock. 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 Alex heard the sound of small, soft footsteps and saw Christina walking towards his. She wasn't wearing her tight-fitting armor, but the traditional combat suit with pants and shirts with leather armor over it. Although she looked quite beautiful, Alex wasn't in the mood to appreciate her beauty today. Christina stood beside Alex and after a moment of silence, she asked, "What are you thinking? You've been here since morning, should you get some rest? After all, haven't you been able to sleep a wink? Although things have become clearer here, more difficult battles will be fought in the future. So, should you make use of the little time you have," Christina advised Alex. "Rest? Ho ha, do I deserve to rest?" Alex said sarcastically as she put her hands on her forehead. "My people died uselessly because of those scum. Christina, tell me the truth, am I a good leader?" Christina raised her eyebrows and asked, "What do you mean? I brought 1,000 soldiers with me and nearly 100 of them died here because of that toxic gas. What do you think about this, Christina? Whose fault is it, leaving aside those scumbags who made it up? Was there any guilt within me for not expecting this?" Alex asked with a sad expression. "In war, death and glory go hand in hand, Alex. This is your first battle so you might not understand it, but no matter what happens, in a war like this things will be sacrificed," Christina explained in a soft tone. "You'll get used to this sooner or later." "No," Alex shouted in an angry tone. "Glory and death don't go hand in hand. What does it matter that you sacrifice yourself to protect the world when no one knows of your brave actions? Most people use other people as scapegoats and sacrifice them in times of need just to achieve their goals, just like those scoundrels who used experiments to make this toxic gas. This is absolutely disgusting, but that's not a problem, Christina. My precious soldiers died worthlessly. It's my fault that I couldn't predict this plague. If I had a hunch about it, I would make sure that none of the forces on our side inhale the air, but I couldn't because I'm an incompetent king." Christina's expression turned solemn upon hearing Alex's words. Amiden's last counterattack did mortal damage to the forces. Around 100 people from Nevin and 170 from his group died from the gas. "It's okay, Alex, it's not your fault or anyone else's, and none of the fallen would blame you. Maybe they were waiting in heaven to see you basking in glory," Christina consoled Alex as she tried to cheer him up. Alex took a deep breath, looked up at the ocean blue sky and spoke. "Please watch me from there, I'll make sure to crush those scum and destroy them completely." "Amiden scum, you should get ready," Alex said as he clenched his fist tightly. "Your Majesty and Lady Christina, everything is ready, everyone is waiting for the morning ceremony to begin." Alex nodded and waved his hand. "Christina, let's go." Chapter 125, You Are Quite Reliable. Inside the office room, Alex looked at the reports made by his subordinate. Alex's bandit nature got the better of him once again, and unable to get rid of it, he decided to take away all the weapons from the opposing forces for his own use. The quality of the weapons was quite good, and after melting them down and undergoing further refinement, they could be made into much better quality weapons. Alex put down the document and looked at Christina, who was taking a sip of coffee while doing some paperwork. "Christina, where are mine?" Alex asked as he pointed at Christina's hands. Christina looked at the coffee in her hand and staring at Alex spoke in an indifferent tone. "Did you order coffee?" Alex slapped his forehead, calming his nerves, and asked, "Christina, did we receive any orders from Catherine recently, or do we have to act on our own from now on? The 5-day deadline will be up today and we need to head towards the next battlefield." Christina put the cup aside and said, "Yeah, I've been thinking about it. Knowing her, she should have already sent a messenger. He should arrive soon with the order. By the way, what are you going to do now? How are you going to act?" Christina asked Alex curiously. Alex rubbed her chin and pursed her lips in thought for a moment. "Should I act independently and give Amiden a heart attack?" Alex muttered and rolled her eyes at Christina and dismissed the idea. "I'll accompany you, Christina. If I join you, we can finish things quickly and converge the army at one point and then head straight for Amiden capital," Alex suggested with a wide smile. Christina thought for a moment and agreed to Alex's proposal, which sounded quite plausible. Knock. Knock. While Christina and Alex were arguing, they heard a loud knock and a servant shouted from behind the door. "Your Majesty and Lady Christina, we have received a message from Wright. Come in," Christina said. A burly man entered the room, placed the envelope on the desk, gave them both a gentle bow, and left. Christina opened the letter and began to read. Her expression changed a little and her eyelashes fluttered a little as she blinked a few times. "What's in the letter?" Alex asked with a grim expression. There weren't many things that could elicit such a reaction from Christina, so whatever was written in the letter, It should be something serious. Christina closed the letter and looked at Alex's worried look and said, "There's been a change of scenery. We won against Amidon at the Crever Plains and Rocky Chancel quite easily, but according to the letter, it seemed like Amidon had lost on purpose, rather than us winning thanks to our strength." Alex raised his eyebrows, unable to understand what was going on. "Are you sure about that? I mean, Amidon let us win on two fronts on purpose when they were already in a worse state. Sounds rather strange," Alex said as he analyzed the situation. Yes, Catherine's analysis was rarely wrong. The group observed strange movements in Amidon's forces before their surrender and retreat. "Maybe they're planning something else," Christina muttered. "So, what orders do we have now?" Christina asked. "He asked us to head to the capital where we will jointly think about our next operation." "I see," Alex muttered with a deep sigh as he lay on the couch staring at the ceiling. Things were moving a bit faster than expected. If things keep going like this, he will be meeting Catherine within 3 or 4 days. He hadn't even fully sorted things out with Christina and now he had to tangle with Catherine. He was sure that he would soon find himself in a situation where he would be crushed from both fronts. Alex turned his neck towards Christina, who returned to her work. "She looks very elegant and stunning even while working," Alex muttered and stood up from his seat and walked towards Christina and sat on the armpit of the chair. Christina rolled her eyes at Alex but tried to ignore it as best as she could. She was already used to Alex pestering her little by little during her stay. "Hey, Christina, would you mind if I asked you a question?" Alex spoke with a soft tone. Christina simply nodded her head in response to Alex's words. "Christina, tell me the truth. What do you think of me?" Christina, who was writing something, suddenly stopped and turned her head to see Alex's red eyes looking at her with an innocent puppy-like look. That startled her. If someone didn't know how Alex rampages on the battlefield, they might think that this boy is sweet and too cute, and the seriousness in his eyes on top of that makes it hard to ignore. Christina pondered for a moment about Alex's question. At first, she didn't know what to say and was at a loss for words, but she thought back to the time when Alex entered the battlefield and then eliminated the traitors, plunging the other side into chaos. Also, unlike others who think that women don't deserve to be on the battlefield, Alex was quite supportive of her and she liked his open-mindedness. Thinking about all things, she could only sum it up in one word. "Reliable." "You're quite reliable," Christina said with her lips slightly curled. Alex's eyes widened for a moment when she saw the small change in Christina's expression along with her lips and thought she might be hallucinating, but it disappeared like a flower that wilted as soon as it bloomed. But still, just one word. The seriousness with which she thought and took her time, I thought she was going to say a bunch of words like, "Alex, you're handsome, wonderful, a pretty and strong man," but Alex sighed with a sad expression. "At least she said something nice instead of cursing me," Alex muttered to herself as she walked out of that place and started walking towards the door to leave. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.